Chapter 102. There were no words to describe Shui Wangshu's simple attack. With one attack, thousands of rainbow glass swords were destroyed. Feng Qianzhua leaned against the steps and covered his bleeding abdomen. He shouted in shock and anger, "Wise." Most people had not recovered from the shock of just now. They did not understand what Feng Qianzhua meant by his question. But Shui Wangshu knew. He looked with slight disdain and sympathy at Feng Qianzhua. He said coolly, "For someone like you, even if you use a suicidal sword move, you lack some presence and true meaning." Waves of gasps and sharp inhales sounded. Hearing Shui Wangshu's words, many of the important people of Zhushan district started to understand what had happened just now. From the start, Shui Wangshu did not want to tangle with Feng Qianzhua too much. The Bazin Kendo ground sword manual had many profound changes that outsiders did not know of. So he had only attacked once. This was a blow that his life-bond sword had accumulated power for many years. None of Feng Qianzhua's sword moves could be stopped, so he used the Seven Treasures glazed sword to shake out thousands of swords, using offense to counter offense. Yet Shui Wangshu did not change his sword moves at all. Feng Qianzhua did not dare to die together with Shui Wangshu. It could even be said that from the start, Shui Wangshu had felt that Feng Qianzhua's sword essence was missing something. Feng Qianzhua did not want to die, so he could only lose. Feng Qianzhua clutched his abdomen as blood flowed between his fingers. He felt the great pain in his abdomen and that terrifying sword essence. Thinking of how his peace had been broken by this blow, he finally laughed crazily. "You won, but you think you can safely leave Zhushan district? Just now, you used up almost all of your vital energy in that blow. Kill him. Kill them. Do not let them go." As Feng Qianzhua's harsh laughter sounded, angry shouts came from the crowd that blocked every street. Ding Ning's expression was still calm. He looked up at the sky and saw many black crows circling below the white clouds and above the eaves. With a clang, a middle-aged man dressed in brocade robes had pulled out his sword and charged. His face was very similar to Feng Qianzhua. He should be one of Feng Qianzhua's nephews. The crimson longsword in his hand emitted many blazing flames, which looked like dancing fire snakes. But facing the sword, Shui Wangshu just slowly bent down. He picked up a long bamboo broom by the side. Then he simply used the bamboo broom to stab out like a sword. The front end of the broom started to burn. The man in brocade robes wanted to swing his sword and cut down the burning broom, but for some reason, he could not touch it, as if there was a strange time difference. The burning bamboo broom stabbed into his chest. With a pop, the flames went out. Many small bamboo branches that had been half-burned stabbed into his flesh and were pushed out by the blood and energy flowing out of his body. The man in brocade robes stood in disbelief. His sword futilely reached forward, but it was still several feet away from Shui Wangshu's body. In the next moment, he dazedly lowered his head and looked at the long handle of the broom pressed against his chest. Then he lost all his strength and collapsed to the ground. Several more people roared and rushed forward. Shui Wangshu stood where he was and stabbed several more times. Blood gushed out of these people's chests as they screamed and fell to the ground. The broom handle was still a broom handle, just an ordinary long bamboo pole. However, because the small bamboo branches at the front had already scattered, the very front died in a layer of blood. Under the friction between flesh and bone, it already gained a bit of sharpness. So right now, in Shui Wangshu's hands, this ordinary long bamboo pole was like an exceptionally long bamboo sword. The surroundings quickly quieted. Seeing the cultivators fall into pools of blood after Shui Wangshu's simple stab, many of the important people of Zhushan district who had been prepared to attack sat back down with pale faces. In the few stabs just now, Shui Wangshu had not used any vital energy. He was just using this method to tell everyone that even if he did not use vital energy, there was still a great disparity in the understanding and power of the sword between Realm 7 cultivators and ordinary cultivators and martial artists. In order to kill a cultivator above Realm 7, one had to use a large army, or many Realm 5 and 6 cultivators to fight. In the present Zhushan district, if they forced Shui Wangshu to stay, how many people would die? I may die. Everyone will die. Shui Wangshu casually lowered the long bamboo pole dripping with blood. He looked coolly at Feng Qianjue, who was surrounded by people, and said, "But I can guarantee that I will kill you before I die." Because of pain and anger, Feng Qianjue's entire body trembled. Yet he started to realize that Shui Wangshu spoke the truth. Just now, he understood that his understanding of the sword was nothing compared to Shui Wangshu. If he did not have the famed sword of the Bazin Kendo ground, he would have lost even more miserably. "You go too far." He did not know how to respond, so he shouted in anger. Shui Wangshu smiled faintly. From the start, he had said to Feng Qianjue that it was useless to speak when they did not agree. In the end, the sword had to speak. If he had not felt good when he had pierced through the roiling waves, he would not have said a word after defeating Feng Qianjue. So, he did not want to say anything at this time. He turned and motioned for Ding Ning to follow him. Ding Ning turned and followed closely behind him. But at the same time, he said calmly, "How did we go too far?" "From the start, we just wanted to return to Dingyan Bead. You set the rules. When you were shouting and cursing, we did not even say a word. In the Qin dynasty, there are countless fair duels, with predetermined conditions. But there are few places like Zhushan district where you do not admit defeat after losing and want to kill us all here in the Qin dynasty. Do you not feel ashamed? And your Feng family?" After a slight pause, Ding Ning did not turn around. He followed Shui Wangshu through the parting crowd and said calmly, "Originally, a matter that could have been resolved in a fair duel in front of the temple fair. But you used the Empress painting to threaten. In the end, you lost, and wanted to incite all of Zhushan district to try and kill a Realm 7 cultivator. Even if the Feng family does not admit this, if this matter spreads, what do you think the officials of Chongling will think? Will they feel that the Feng family did well?" Hearing Ding Ning's calm and cold words, and thinking carefully about the words, Feng Qianjue's body grew colder and more terrified. In the end, his clothes were soaked in cold sweat. Watching Ding Ning and Shui Wangshu disappear from his sight, he gave a desperate bestial howl. The crowd parted in front of Shui Wangshu, like the ocean, opening a path. "How do you feel?" Ding Ning, who was following Shui Wangshu like a shadow, looked at the Zhushan district people with complicated expressions and asked Shui Wangshu softly. Shui Wangshu turned to look at him and laughed like a child. He said, "I feel very good." Then he asked Ding Ning in response, "How do you feel?" Ding Ning answered seriously, "I also feel very good." Shui Wangshu said, "I do not mean that. I am asking you how you feel after swallowing the Dingyan bead." Feeling the pure medicinal power of the Dingyan bead slowly released in his body, Ding Ning's expression grew serious. Other than the legendary Yu Emperor who had left behind this method, no one knew the secrets of the 9-death silkworm. Even for him who had cultivated the 9-death silkworm, some of the characteristics of this method could only be detected by him as his cultivation progressed. The moment he swallowed the Dingyan bead, he found that he had overlooked a fact. It was not just the pills that directly affected physical energy and vital energy that could help him cultivate faster. This kind of pill that nourished the body and organs could also help him cultivate faster. Because the 9-death silkworm's greatest weakness was that it used up too much of its energies. The 9-death silkworm used up its energies quickly, but it had to control its cultivation speed in order to not let its organs fail too quickly. Pills that nourish the organs and nourish the body could allow the body to consume more energies to cultivate when the organs failed at the same rate. Simply speaking, the 9-death silkworm could cultivate faster, but his organs were not strong enough and could not withstand a faster speed. So, he did not need spirit medicines that directly affected physical energy and vital energy. As long as it was a nourishing pill that could strengthen the organs, he could cultivate faster in the future. Not only did the medicinal power of this beauty-nourishing pearl make him feel as if he had been injected with a lot of new life, but to him, it also gave him some epiphanies and reminders during his cultivation. "I feel very good." So he looked seriously at Shui Wangshu and said, "At least, I can win a few years of time." Shui Wangshu did not know what Ding Ning was truly thinking, but he could feel Ding Ning's sincere gratitude. This made him even more satisfied. He stroked his little white beard and said with a satisfied smile, "That's good." Looking at the satisfied smile on Shui Wangshu's face, Ding Ning's heart filled with grievances and killing intent was filled with a kind of warmth. He thought of Zhongsun Qianxue, the old woman in the fish market. He thought that other than those two, he had never spent so much time with a person in Chongling. Thinking that this white-haired old man did not have much time left, his heart softened. He suggested softly, "Since this is the case, do you want to go drink? Do you want me to find a girl to accompany you?" Shui Wangshu suddenly turned his head and looked in disbelief at him. He pulled off several more strands of his beard. "Are you joking?" Chapter 103. You don't like women? In the carriage, Ding Ning looked suspiciously at Shui Wangshu. Or, is there a problem with your body? What does a child know? Seeing Ding Ning still tirelessly discussing this problem with him, Shui Wangshu was slightly annoyed. Ding Ning asked stubbornly, "Then why?" "Just boring." Shui Wangshu looked at the calm Ding Ning and could not even get angry. He said helplessly, "Good wine and songs are naturally a happy thing in life. But most of the courtesans are ordinary. After seeing too many, I find it boring." Ding Ning immediately looked at Shui Wangshu again. "You do not need to look at me like this," Shui Wangshu said bitterly. "Who hasn't been young and frivolous? Especially when you've been stuck at a certain level in your cultivation and haven't been able to break through for many years without any progress at all. It's very normal for you to feel depressed and find a place to drink." It was just that after putting on a show for so many times, he felt that there was no meaning in it at all. After all, a person was an object of affection, and he could not escape the word affections in his entire life. For me, even the most beautiful and young woman pouring wine for me cannot feel true joy. If there is something lacking, it is better not to do it. Ding Ning frowned slightly. He thought and looked seriously at Shui Wangshu. "You have been in Chongling for so long. Have you never met a woman you truly like?" Shui Wangshu suddenly grew silent. After a long time, he smiled slightly and said, "Of course. I will go see her when I return to Chongling." The carriage traveled on the road back to Chongling. Perhaps it was because he had finally unleashed the sword strike he had been holding back for a long time, or perhaps it was because he was tired from using his full strength to fight Feng Qianzhua. But in the following 10 days, Shui Wangshu spoke less and spent more time resting with his eyes closed. In the evening, this carriage that had changed wheels several times and the carriage and curtains were covered in dust, finally drove into the walled Chongling. When this dusty carriage slowly moved along the crisscrossing streets of Chongling and stopped at a place, Li Changshuo's eyes lit up. Ding Ning, on the other hand, was rarely calm. He lifted the curtains in disbelief and looked at the building in front of him. He asked in a shocked and admiring tone, "The woman you truly like is inside?" Even if it was an official residence or a brothel, it would not have shocked him to this extent. Because he recognized this place. This place with yellow courtyards and gray tiles was one of the few temples in Chongling, and was usually filled with incense. Could it be that Shui Wangshu actually had such taste and liked a nun? "What are you thinking?" With a glance, he knew what Ding Ning was thinking. Shui Wangshu shouted and slapped Ding Ning, almost slapping him out of the carriage. "Come down with me." Shui Wangshu rolled his eyes at Ding Ning. He was the first to get off the carriage and enter the temple. There were several ginkgo trees planted in front of the temple hall. They were very old and needed several people to surround them. The branches and leaves were thick. There were 2 life release ponds on the 2 sides. Shui Wangshu stopped in front of the life release pond on the left. Ding Ning came forward in confusion. He saw many fat red carp swimming around, and many turtles climbing on the rocks in the pond. Before he could speak, Shui Wangshu pointed with a finger, and an extremely pure true essence pierced into the pool like a sword, exploding near the bottom of the pool with a hum. A millstone-like object suddenly floated up. At this time, Ding Ning noticed that this was an old turtle of unknown years. Its shell was as dark as stone. It had been stunned by Shui Wangshu's vital energy. Shui Wangshu reached out and grabbed the old turtle before anyone in the temple noticed. He quickly flashed out. Ding Ning looked at the water under his feet and did not react immediately. He quickly chased to the door and looked at Shui Wangxiu, who was about to get on the carriage. He could not understand. "What are you doing?" Shui Wangxiu casually threw the millstone-like old turtle under the seat of the carriage and said, "Of course, I am going to stew it." Ding Ning stilled again. He could not help but glance at the life-release pond. "If you're not joking, this does not seem good?" Shui Wangxiu glanced coolly at him and said, "Get on." Ding Ning could not understand. He knew that there had to be a reason for something he could not understand. So he did not think more, and just watched. The carriage stopped in front of a restaurant. This restaurant was not large, but it appeared to be doing well. Under Shui Wangxiu's orders, the kitchen of this restaurant really stewed this old turtle. A wash-basin-sized clay pot was placed in front of Shui Wangxiu and Ding Ning. Shui Wangxiu still did not explain anything. He calmly raised his chopsticks and ate the meat. Ding Ning did not ask anything. He ate the meat and drank the soup. Regardless of the origin of this old turtle, the chef of this small restaurant did have some tricks up his sleeves. The old turtle's meat was scattered a little in advance. After stewing it, it didn't feel that it was too old, but it was chewy and delicious. It took a lot of time to stew this old turtle. Shui Wangxiu asked for several pots of huadiao. He and Ding Ning finished this pot of old turtle. When they walked out of the restaurant, it was already night, and the winter was even colder. Yet Shui Wangxiu had no intentions of resting. He ordered the man who had been driving the carriage for White Goat Cave to go back and rest. Then he did not sit in the carriage and slowly walked through the streets of Chongling with his hands behind his back. Ding Ning silently followed behind him and walked through the darkness of Chongling's winter night. After passing through a dozen streets and many paths, Shui Wangxiu stopped at a mound. There was a small pond in front of the mound. On the slope of the mound, there was a grave. Ding Ning inexplicably realized something. He took a deep breath and looked at Shui Wangxiu. Shui Wangxiu's cheeks were unusually red, but his expression was more peaceful than usual. "This is the woman I like the most. But when I was young, before I could speak, she had someone she liked. At that time, senior sect brother and I only cared about cultivation and missed a lot of time. But if I had the chance to choose again, I may not speak at that time. While she married into an ordinary merchant's family, she lived a happy and beautiful life in Chongling. Even I could not make her happier." Shui Wangxiu smiled slightly. He turned to look at Ding Ning and said, "I had an idea when I was young about that old turtle. Back then, when I was looking at this green turtle by the pond, I suddenly had an idea that I did not know what it would taste like. But I thought that it was something that had been set free, and I was embarrassed to secretly take it out to try. When I was young, I had many interesting ideas in my head that might make me happy. But now I'm too old. Many people and many things are long gone. Even if I don't want to have any regrets and want to do what I wanted to do before, but didn't for various reasons, there are not many things I can do now. Only this old turtle is still here. After today, it won't be here anymore. Now that I think about it, the present Chongling is like that pond to me. I am an old turtle that will not die. There is not much meaning in being trapped in this pond." Shui Wangxiu laughed. He glanced at Ding Ning and then turned to look at the grave. He said, "But I did what I wanted to do for a long time. The old turtle tastes very good. I came to see her again. I am very happy." Hearing Shui Wangxiu say these things that he would not usually say, and the words were messy and repetitive now, Ding Ning shook his head gently. He frowned slightly and said, "Since it is a happy matter, do not speak so heavily. Do not speak as though you have to finish the last few things and have me send you off. People will grow old in the end. Who can live forever?" Shui Wangxiu calmly turned and started to leave. His expression grew grave as he said slowly, "Other people may not understand the Empress methods, but my senior sect brother and I know very well. From the time my senior sect brother and I rejected her and divided White Goat Cave's spirit veins into 3, to the time White Goat Cave was forced to merge, it was just half a month. We used more than a dozen days to return to Chongling from Jushan district, so it is about time." Ding Ning bowed his head slightly and said softly, "I did not know she was so cold in the past. Shui Wangshu did not know the true meaning of Ding Ming's words. He looked at the other with a pitiful gaze and said softly, "You have to understand, the higher the position in Chongling, the colder it is. Those who can sit higher will naturally be colder." Ding Ming silently followed behind him. Seeing the other's faint shadow fall on him, he slowly said, "Remember you promised me that you would see me show you true glory at the Min Mountain Sword Trials." Shui Wangshu paused, turned his head and said solemnly, "I will do my best." Ding Ming took a deep breath and looked up at the distant Chongling. In this moment his gaze was strange. He was not as tall as those unchanging buildings, but he seemed to be looking down at Chongling from above. Chapter 104. You really have no problems? At the entrance to Falling Parasol's alley, Ding Ming looked suspiciously at Shui Wangshu and asked, "Of course there is no problem. Usually, when you cultivate in White Goat Cave, you must return home every day. Now that you have left home for a long time, why are you not going home? Also, even if you want to accompany me, you have to give me some private time," Shui Wangshu said gently. Ding Ming thought for a while and did not move immediately. "Do not look like you will not see me after tonight," Shui Wangshu said with a headache. "There really won't be any problems." Ding Ming nodded and said calmly, "Just remember what you promised. Do I have to lie to a child who has just entered the sect like you after living so long?" Shui Wangshu was both angry and amused. He waved his hand and motioned for Ding Ming to get out of here. Ding Ming did not say anything else and bowed silently. Shui Wangshu did not look at Ding Ming and turned to leave. The moon was high in the sky. Shui Wangshu had no intentions of returning to White Goat Cave. He walked along the straight streets towards the center of Chongling. At the center of Chongling was the Imperial Palace. The earth-yellow Imperial Palace walls were not grand in the cold winter night. There was not even an obvious guard on the walls. Yet when he stepped onto the outermost world bridge of the Imperial Palace, an indigo-robed Taoist came through the air and landed in front of Shui Wangshu. Shui Wangshu of White Goat Cave requests an audience with Her Highness the Empress. Shui Wangshu calmly bowed to this indigo-robed Taoist and said softly, "It was against the rules to request an audience with the Empress in the middle of the night when the palace gates were closed." Yet this indigo-robed Taoist only raised an eyebrow and nodded. "Elder Shui, please wait a moment. I will go and report." There was even a hint of genuine respect in his words. A cultivator who had crossed Realm 7 was worthy of the respect of any cultivator and qualified to make such a request. The Taoist in indigo flew away. Shui Wangshu stood alone in front of the empty palace, looking very lonely. However, the Taoist in indigo did not make him wait for a long time. Or it could be said that the woman in the high position did not need to pretend to be dignified at all. In just a moment, the Taoist in indigo flew back to him and said, "The Empress has given her permission. Follow me." They didn't take any side door. The heavy main gate of the Imperial Palace slowly opened to let the Taoist in indigo and Shui Wangshu pass through. The Empress was not in the study where she often stayed. She stood on the stone path with bronze figurines on both sides. Behind her stood two beautiful maids, but just like at any other time, her dazzling beauty made any woman standing next to her pale in comparison. She looked at Shui Wangshu, who was walking towards her quietly, her perfect eyes emotionless. When Shui Wangshu saw her, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Because she was too perfect, she seemed unreal. Because she was too dazzling, she seemed to burn the eyes. When he was 30 paces away from her, Shui Wangshu stopped and then bowed deeply. He said, "Greetings, Your Highness the Empress." The Empress looked coolly at the white-haired Shui Wangshu, her perfect face still emotionless. "Rise." Shui Wangshu nodded. He did not state his intentions, only maintaining a humble posture. However, there was a strange change in his body. It was as if countless things that had originally existed in his body were about to fly out of his body and into the sky. "Stop." At this time, the Empress looked calmly at him and said, Shui Wangshu stopped. All the unusual presence in his body disappeared. "Why?" The Empress' perfect eyes finally had a hint of emotion. She asked in puzzlement. For cultivators like you, cultivation is more important than life. Without cultivation, what do you want to do with your life? Shui Wangxi replied calmly, I want to see the Min Mountain Sword trials next year. Please allow me, Empress. You know your limits. Chongling is so large. Can I not tolerate you? The Empress did not hesitate and said slowly, I will naturally agree to your request, but I do not want you to use such a method to request. You must help me do something. Shui Wangxi was slightly surprised and asked, What is it? The Empress looked calmly at him and said, Go teach Liang Lian a lesson for me. Shui Wangxi did not look up. He frowned slightly and was waiting for a calm response. At this time, the Empress slowly said, Take that youth who has been following you these days. Shui Wangxi suddenly shook and felt a wave of coldness. He suddenly looked up at the Empress' perfect features and asked, Why? The Chu's questions were extremely simple, but they could completely understand each other's meaning. Hearing Shui Wangxi's question, the Empress said, Because that youth's performance up until now has been good. I treat every cultivator of the Qin dynasty the same. I hope that every cultivator will prioritize the Qin dynasty. What they feel when they are young may decide their entire life. Since even I feel that youth's performance is good, then he may become a useful talent of the Qin dynasty in the future. So I do not want him to have any prejudice against me, or even the entire imperial palace. Simply speaking, I do not want him to hate me. The Empress looked at the bronze figures on the two sides of the stone path and said in an indifferent but undisguised tone, So I do not want him to feel that you are using the method of destroying your own cultivation to ask to live through next year's Min Mountain Sword trials. But I also want him to know respect and rules. So, I want you to take him with you. Shui Wangxi looked at her perfect and emotionless face and knew there was no turning back. He took a deep breath and nodded seriously. I was negligent. Your Highness' arrangement is the best for him. The Empress did not say anything else and turned to walk towards the study behind her. Shui Wangxi looked at her perfect back and could not help but think inside, So you are colder than I imagined. The Empress seemed to be able to sense Shui Wangxi's thoughts, but she did not care. She knew that many people thought she was cold. But ruling a country was a cruel matter. Only cold-blooded laws had order. Zhang Sun Qianxue sat silently on the bed with her clothes on. She looked at Ding Ning, who had washed up and changed into clean clothes, and asked, What did you do with Feng Qianzhua? Ding Ning, who had been waiting for her to speak and decide if she wanted to dual cultivate or go back to her bed, stilled and said curiously, Why would you ask this question? Because I do not like Feng Qianzhua very much. Zhang Sun Qianxue glanced at Ding Ning and indicated that he could go back to his bed to sit. She said coldly, At the time, the Yuanwu Emperor personally led his army to attack the Bazin Kendo ground. Feng Qianzhua was one of the first Bazin Kendo ground disciples to surrender. If he surrendered, then he surrendered. Even if he sold some of the secrets of the Bazin Kendo ground's formations, it was nothing. Everyone in the Qin dynasty had different ideas about the internal war of the Qin dynasty. But when he turned against them, he said many false things about the Bazin Kendo ground. Those words are filthy to the ears. But if these dirty words spread too much, others will also believe them. Ding Ning sneered and said, But this time, he finally paid a price. He was hit by Shui Wangxi's sword. Even if he recovers, his cultivation will be greatly damaged. With the injuries to his organs, he will not live for many years. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not seem satisfied with this result. She thought and said, I will go and kill him in a while. Ding Ning immediately had a bitter expression and said, We just went to Zhushan district. If you go and kill him on a whim, are you not drawing suspicion to me? Zhang Sun Qianxue frowned. Hearing Ding Ning say this, she felt that this was not good. There are so many people to kill. How can I kill them all at once? Ding Ning muttered, but suddenly he seemed to think of something, and his face suddenly became serious. He opened his mouth to say something, but his eyes were filled with hesitation. Zhang Sun Qianxue did not look at him, but sensed his emotions. She said in displeasure, Speak. There is one person I can kill, and he may have something I want, Ding Ning said. Zhang Sun Qianxue said. Who? Ding Ning said gravely. Nangong Shang. Zhang Sun Qianxue thought for a long time before remembering this name. A disciple of the Bazin Kendo ground sword vault? Ding Ning nodded. Compared to Feng Qianzhua, you should hate him more. Back then, he didn't just steal many famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground ahead of time, he also destroyed 2 important formations of the Bazin Kendo ground. He also said many disgusting things. After a pause, Ding Ning added softly, even more importantly, he is in Chongling. Zhang Sun Qianxue said happily. Where is he in Chongling? Just like Shui Wangshu, you have endured for a long time. Also, you have just formed your sword. If I do not let you use your sword, it will be detrimental to your future cultivation. You may cause trouble. This is the true reason I just now decided to tell you about this person. But even if it is revenge, killing is not something to be happy about. Ding Ning looked at Zhang Sun Qianxue's beautiful figure through the curtain and said slowly, First, I want you to promise me that you will be absolutely safe. Do not let anyone discover that you went there. Zhang Sun Qianxue was slightly impatient and said angrily, I am too lazy to use my brain. You can arrange it. Ding Ning nodded and said, All right, I will find Wang Taishu tomorrow to arrange. Zhang Sun Qianxue finally thought of something and said coldly, Wang Taishu came to find you a few days ago and said that he had done what you wanted him to do. Ding Ning's body shook slightly, his eyes filled with joy. What does Nangong Shang have that you need? Zhang Sun Qianxue glanced at him and asked, Is it something from the Bazin Kendo ground? Not something from the Bazin Kendo ground, a pill recipe of the Nangong family. Ding Ning explained softly. The Nangong family was previously responsible for the medicinal cuisine of the Bazin Kendo ground. I need their 5-yang pill recipe. Chapter 105. Early in the morning, Ding Ning opened the door of the wine shop at about the same time as usual. He habitually walked out of the shop with a large coarse porcelain bowl. However, as soon as he took a step out, he thought of something and returned to the shop. He took another large bowl and then walked to the noodle shop where he usually ate breakfast. Small icicles were hanging from the eaves on the 2 sides. But the noodle shop was too small and could not hold a table. So they only built a shed at the door and used some cotton cloth to block the wind. White steam swirled in the shed. While it could not truly expel the cold, at least it made people feel warm. Ding Ning saw Shui Wangshu sitting in the distance. He jogged over. Seeing that Shui Wangshu did not have a bowl in front of him, he could not help but laugh. Boss, a bowl of red oil and spicy noodles. Shui Wangshu also laughed and then called out loudly. Ding Ning also asked for a bowl of the same noodles. When the noodles were served, he came out with 2 bowls and handed one to Shui Wangshu. The 2 finished eating and then looked at each other's slightly sweaty foreheads. Ding Ning asked, You came so early today. Where are you preparing to go? Shui Wangshu thought and then said, Today, we are going to the Tiger Wolf Army Northern Camp. Ding Ning was silent for a moment and then said, Who are you going to find? Shui Wangshu said honestly, General Yang Lian. Ding Ning's brow trembled slightly. His gaze unconsciously landed on the last flower sword at his waist. He increasingly felt that this remnant sword was like a thread in the unseen world that tied more and more matters and people together. Or, it could be said that this was like a curse. Before this sword appeared, many things seemed to be very far away from him. Even if he had been planning certain things and inquiring about certain things, after this sword appeared, many favors and grudges came one after another. It seemed that he could not get rid of them. Was this the will of the heavens? It wasn't that he was too anxious, but that the time had really come? Shui Wangshu looked at his strange expression and asked, What's wrong? Ding Ning raised his head and asked softly, Is this what the Empress wants? You went to listen to her last night? Shui Wangshu paused for a moment, then nodded. Because I look forward to your performance at the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I also think that if you can win as first, then you will have great glory. Originally, living a few more years is not as important as my old face, but for this, I have to go and listen to her opinion. After a pause, Shui Wangshu said gently, Originally, she did not want you to know this was her arrangement. For me, I did not want you to know this was her arrangement, because she is right. If you have hatred towards her and the people in court, it is not a good thing for your future growth in Chongling. But I know you are too smart. Even if I do not tell you, you will be able to guess. Ding Ning listened to these words and did not express any thoughts about the Empress. He said, regardless of the reason she is dissatisfied with Liang Lian, if Liang Lian is just a Realm 6 cultivator, she will not have to waste so much effort. So Liang Lian must have reached Realm 7. You will die. She wants me to see you die with my own eyes. She probably wants you to find an excuse, a reason why you must challenge Liang Lian. This way, even if I will hate Liang Lian. It is not a problem for the officials to hate each other. After all, they are just the weapons of the Qin dynasty, His Majesty's private property, and they can restrict each other. After saying this, Ding Ning was silent for a moment and said, I know she is cold, but I had not expected her to be so cold. Xue Wangshu had been listening calmly. Hearing this, he shook his head and said, You are still too smart. In terms of knowledge of politics, it is not just the people of Zhushan district who are not as good as you. Most people in Chongling are not as good as you. But if you are truly smart, you should know it is best to pretend you do not see these things. He looked at Ding Ning's eyes and warned in a heavier tone, Even if you feel a threat of hatred towards her and the court, you have to pretend you do not. Because this at least shows a submissive attitude. Ding Ning said in a cold voice, Right now, she and His Majesty do not care if the cultivators of the Qin dynasty have their own thoughts. They only care if we obey at certain times. A powerful dynasty must give up on the interests and thoughts of some people. We are just a small minority. Also, in truth, everyone in the Qin dynasty is living and working in peace. His Majesty is the strongest and wisest emperor in the history of the Qin dynasty. Xue Wangshu smiled slightly and said, It is good that you understand. Even if her thoughts are cold, our initial request of being able to watch the Min Mountain Sword trials will be fulfilled. From this point of view, we should be grateful to her. Ding Ning was silent. Xue Wangshu seemed to see through his thoughts. He smiled and said gently, In reality, you should change your thinking. I have truly angered an unbeatable opponent, but this opponent still gives me room to choose and enough time. Also, I can guarantee that I will not pass through this time in pain. If you think this way, you will not feel that it is especially cruel for her to want you to watch me slowly die. Also, you will be able to see a true battle above Realm 7. This may be useful for your future cultivation. You are right. Ding Ning put away the 2 bowls. His expression returned to calmness as he said this. But his heart was unusually cold as he spoke slowly. It is a pity that she has such thoughts. It is a pity that, even without these things, I cannot forgive her coldness. The morning light grew thicker, but the sky over Chongling grew hazy because another snowstorm started to fall. This time, it was not a light snow, but a heavy snowfall. Liang Lian walked on the practice field of the Tiger Wolf army. His military boots creaked as he stepped on the snow. He was quite satisfied when he saw the Tiger Wolf army's war chariots that were already in the midst of a meticulous charging drill on another training field. However, at that moment, he sensed a peculiar aura. This was a presence that could attract the attention of any cultivator in Chongling. This presence pulled at the primal energies of the universe outside the camp and the flying snow. It slowly pulled up a large flag in the air. Sensing the snow flag forming in the air, Liang Lian frowned deeply. He did not hesitate. His military equipment steadily stepped over the snow and walked out of the camp. As he walked, many cultivators in the camp sensed the abnormality. They walked out of their tents and flashed out of the camp in shock. A large yellow umbrella slowly floated over in the wind and snow. This umbrella was very large. There were 2 figures, one large and one small, under the umbrella. The wind and snow fell on the shiny umbrella. They did not stick and floated upwards. In the air above the umbrella, there were some refractions that revealed the outline of a large flag. Seeing Liang Lian walk out of the camp, the white-haired old man under the umbrella smiled calmly and said, General Liang Lian, I challenge you. Liang Lian looked silently at Shui Wangxiu and Ding Ning under the umbrella. His cold eyes had been slightly puzzled, but when he heard the words, he immediately understood many things. The incoming wind and snow parted to the sides in fear. His figure suddenly became clear in the wind and snow. Then he reached out and made a fist behind him. All the cultivators coming out of the camp saw his gesture and stopped. They did not take a step out of the camp. All right. Then he looked at Shui Wangxiu and nodded. He said coolly, I accept your challenge. Ding Ning saw Liang Lian clearly in the wind and snow. He was certain that Song Shinshu was right. He did not say anything and silently started to retreat. Liang Lian's gaze suddenly landed on Ding Ning. He seemed to remember something and said expressionlessly, Your student is interesting. Shui Wangxiu smiled slightly and said, I will need General Liang's guidance in the future. Liang Lian did not answer. His gaze moved away from Ding Ning. Then his body began to swell. It was as if an iron mountain was standing at the entrance of the military camp. Shui Wangxiu smiled and said, General, please take my sword. The moment he spoke, many of the dancing snowflakes in front of him were pulled in by the primal energies of the universe coming out of his body and formed into lines of ice in the wind and snow. Each ice thread was a talisman thread. Liang Lian's cold expression suddenly grew serious. He suddenly looked up. High up in the sky, the large flag that flickered in and out of existence suddenly changed. The ice lines and surging snow immediately formed an enormous snow sword. Chapter 106. Facing this enormous snow sword that cut through the air at astounding speed, Liang Lian still stood motionless. But waves of cold and shocking murderousness slowly came out of his body. All the snow around him spread outwards in fear. At the same time, strange hissing sounds appeared in the distant sky. This was a large amount of primal energies of the universe flowing, but it did not seem like an invisible mountain, but an invisible beam flying through the air. Very condensed, very fast. Ding Ning was not an ordinary cultivator, so he knew that this speed of moving primal energies of the universe surpassed the limits of ordinary realm 7 third-class cultivators. Surpassing normal limits, a cultivator's body would have to bear a heavier burden. Pew 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 pew. The stone path under Liang Lian's feet cracked. Pieces of stone and snow sprayed out, but his body did not move at all. His skin even flashed with a strange metallic light. Ultimate sword body. Ding Ning saw what method Liang Lian cultivated. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. At this time, the snowflakes around Liang Lian started to dance around him. Those soft feather-like snowflakes became heavy as his vital energy and primal energies of the universe seeped in. These heavy snowflakes formed multiple white curtains of snow around his body. Each curtain of snow was like an enormous millstone. The snow sword slashing down from the sky collided with the snow curtains. They were clearly not made of metal, yet a loud metallic sound was emitted. It was like a bell that needed dozens of people to ring together. The entire north camp of the Tiger Wolf army was shaken. The thin layer of snow that had accumulated on the tents, armaments, and even the sealed chariots fell down. Liang Lian's eyes narrowed slightly. His clothes were cut in countless places by the snowflakes. However, the skin that was exposed under the snowflakes flickered with a strange light. Not a single mark was left behind. Both the enormous snow sword and the curtain of snow around him had been completely shattered. The countless snowflakes had turned into the tiniest powder that could not be seen with the naked eye. This caused the world around him to become brighter. However, he couldn't see Shui Wangxiu's figure. This was because there were tens of thousands of small transparent swords forming around him. The number of transparent objects was too terrifying. As they overlapped, the world in front of him became unreal. Many military cultivators standing at the gates of the camp held their breaths. This was an unimaginable scene for them. Countless small transparent swords floated in the air, forming a sword pagoda that was over 30 meters tall. At the center of the sword pagoda was Liang Lian. In the next instant, the countless transparent swords suddenly accelerated and fell, leaving behind countless trails in the air that could be seen by the naked eye. Liang Lian remained motionless in the face of the thousands of falling swords. Instead, a mocking expression appeared on his cold face, because he could see the sword intent in it. These swords did not hope to defeat him, but to trap him. The 10,000 swords formed a prison because they did not want him to use his physical advantage and launch a fierce attack. Xue Wangxu's understanding of swordsmanship might be much higher than his, but he was too old after all. Under the use of power, he could not use it as freely as Xue Wangxu, and could not fight for a long time. You want room to breathe. You want to fight in such a gentle way, but you think I have to fight fiercely? Looking at the thousands of swords falling around him, and sensing the sword formation they formed, Liang Lian's coldness grew. He calmly reached out with his right hand. There was a loud explosion. A pure presence that only a powerful life bond item could have appeared in the world. The entire camp shook again. This gave everyone a terrifying feeling that a giant monster trapped in chains and cages at the bottom of a river had finally charged out of its cage. But in the next moment, this presence did not explode, but accumulated in front of Liang Lian. A black light flashed. In Liang Lian's hand was a flat, black broadsword. Half of the sword was dark like the black stones by the river. The other half flashed with light like thousands of black waves. He held this sword horizontally across his chest. As the chi of heaven and earth surged into his body, a curved river seemed to appear around his body. His body and the sword in his hand gave off stronger power, but this power only grew within the river. At this time, just like when the bureau chief of the astrology bureau Yi Sealing fought Zhao Zhan, on a turret closest to the north camp of the Tiger Wolf army, an old man dressed in plain cotton clothing sat on a wisteria chair under the eaves. His sparse white hair was not tied up and fell to his shoulders like roots. Behind him stood that tall and unusually humble young man. But unlike the battle between Yi Sealing and Zhao Zhan, he was not dressed in casual clothing, but wore a plain gray official's robe. The official's robe had all kinds of patterns that could only be found on sacrificial artifacts. This meant that this young man was an official of the Clan Law Bureau. Other than these patterns, this official's robe was different from ordinary robes of the Clan Law Bureau in many other ways. The most prominent was the pattern of a deer's head at the back, near the collar. This was the symbol of the bureau chief of the Clan Law Bureau. So this unusually humble young man was the bureau chief of the Clan Law Bureau, Huang Jinwei. This is the strongest move of the cofferdam sword manual, the dam-breaching sword. The old man in plain cotton clothing looked through the wind and snow at Liang Lian's sword move and praised softly. Huang Jinwei, who looked gentle and modest, had a serious expression at this time. Hearing the old man's words, he could not help but say softly, "The dam-breaching sword will become stronger as it accumulates. When it breaks, the sword essence will burst out." General Liang Lian is truly a veteran general. Against Xue, with this kind of sword move, Xue will probably be forced to attack first. The old man nodded in agreement. At this time, a dazzling light appeared in the wind and snow. Xue Wangxu's figure appeared in the wind and snow. A dazzling light appeared in his right palm. It was pure and bright, without any impurities, and even gave off a holy aura. He used his life-bound sword. This sword in the stone that he had just polished in his battle with Feng Qianjue shone brightly. Endless dazzling sword light erupted from the short sword in his hand. It immediately lit up the space in front of him, all of the north camp of the Tiger Wolf army and the north camp of the Tiger Wolf army that was shrouded in wind and snow as bright as day. Xue Wangxu held this sword and stabbed at the dam in front of him with a calm expression. An enormous white goat horn appeared in front of him. Just like the sword he had displayed when he passed the sect master's sword to Li Daoji, this white goat horn was slightly curved. But the sharpest horn of this white goat horn did not directly stab at the dam in front of him and just brushed past it. This white goat's horn, the thickest and sturdiest part, leaned forward and held on. The true meaning of the white goat's sword was not to charge, but to endure, to resist. The curved white goat horn pressed against the dam and used up the power of the dam as though it wanted to break the dam into pieces and let the water inside flow out through the gaps. Seeing such a sword, the old man on the rattan chair in the turret was shocked. He could not help but praise, "Wonderful." Behind him, Huang Jinwei's eyes were also filled with light. At the same time, he could not help but praise, "Wonderful." Liang Lian's pupils suddenly contracted. Seeing the white goat horn-like sword light pressing down, he did not hesitate and punched with his left fist. A muffled explosion sounded again in the world. His left fist, which was as hard as iron, struck his own sword. The life-bound sword in his right hand met Xue Wangshu's life-bound sword. The accumulated sword force seemed to have dissipated in an instant, and the sword in his hand seemed to have turned into a horizontal city wall.
Boom.
His left fist once again hit his own sword, wanting to push away Xue Wangshu's sword. This kind of countervailing power grew so strong that he felt he could not withstand it. With this punch, the stone path under his feet completely exploded, and blood spurted out from the soles of his feet. A powerful force entered Xue Wangshu's body along the sword. Many soft sounds came from Xue Wangshu's body, as if dust was being shaken out of his skin. Yet he only smiled warmly and proudly. His sword did not retreat an inch. Liang Lian gave a muffled grunt and took a step back. More blood sprayed out from under his feet, leaving behind a deep red footprint on the ground. His gaze became extremely cold at this time. Without the slightest hesitation, he let out a furious roar and once again smashed his fist onto his own sword. Countless droplets of boiling hot blood flew out from where his fist and sword collided. The power he had accumulated on his sword was completely unleashed with this attack. Not far in front of him, Ding Ning held an umbrella and calmly watched this battle. In this moment, Ding Ning's eyebrows trembled slightly, his lips trembled, and his hands trembled. Feeling the terrifying power coming out of the other's living body, Xue Wangshu only smiled faintly and proudly and maintained his sword presence. Crack! The intrinsic sword in his hand was broken. The enormous white goat horn broke in the middle. The thick white broken horn seemed to be freed and continued to charge forward. Kacha! Liang Lian's chest caved in slightly. His heavy body flew back a dozen steps, and a mouthful of blood came out of his mouth. Xue Wangshu lowered his hand and smiled in satisfaction. Blood slowly seeped out of the corner of his mouth and dripped down his white beard. In that instant, even more dust flew out of his body, emitting a sizzling sound. It's over. The old man on the turret took a deep breath and stood up. He stretched out his hand, and a majestic aura quickly flowed out from his 5 fingers. At the same time, Ding Ning, who had been waiting silently, came to Xue Wangshu's side. He glanced at Xue Wangshu and did not speak. He held an umbrella to help Xue Wangshu block the falling snow and wind. Chapter 107. Looking at Ding Ning, who was silently holding an umbrella for him, Xue Wangshu smiled in relief. Then he coughed softly. He looked at Liang Lian, who was covered in blood at his feet, hands, and chest. He said softly and proudly, "In terms of youth and strength, I am not as good as you. But in terms of comprehension of the sword manual, I am better than you. So in the end, I won." Liang Lian was silent. For him, victory was not as important as the wounds in his chest. He could feel that Xue Wangshu's sword essence was still killing in his body. He was sure that this kind of injury would affect him greatly in the next few years. An uncontrollable impatience suddenly surged in his heart. Although he knew that Xue Wangshu had paid a heavy price and could not live for a long time, this indescribable impatience made him want to leave Xue Wangshu here. So he silently reached out with his right hand. However, it was also at this moment that everyone in front of the camp suddenly sensed something. They raised their heads and looked towards the sky above. The snowy sky split into 2 halves. There was a path of absolute vacuum in the middle. A terrifying power came down like an impassable wall between Liang Lian, Xue Wangshu, and Ding Ning. The hard and cold stone ground suddenly caved in. With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the ground. This crack, dozens of feet long, was absolutely straight. The width of the crack was the width of a finger from beginning to end without any deviation. This was a sword mark. Many cultivators in the camp gates were shocked speechless by this sword mark. Their gazes passed through the path in the sky and landed on the distant turret. They wondered in shock who the person on the turret was. He was actually able to unleash such a sword strike from such a distance. Liang Lian's expression froze slightly. He looked silently at the sword mark in front of him. He slowly pulled back his right hand and then turned in slow motion towards the camp gates behind him. Under the umbrella, Shui Wangshu laughed. "It is over," he said softly to Ding Ning next to him, and then turned to leave. Ding Ning still did not speak. He just held the umbrella and did his best to block the wind and snow. Shui Wangshu walked a few steps. The light on his face faded, and he quickly became tired. Still not enough. He shook his head and sighed softly. He reached out and put his arm on Ding Ning's shoulder. Ding Ning still did not speak. He moved his body closer to Shui Wangshu and used his thin shoulder to bear most of Shui Wangshu's weight. So good. Shui Wangshu looked at the falling snow around him. He sensed the bone-chilling cold and weakness that he had not felt for a long time as a cultivator. He laughed again. "I defeated the general of the tiger and wolf army in the camp and had His Majesty and the teacher of the bureau chief of the clan law bureau use a cloud-piercing sword for me. Today is so glorious." Ding Ning glanced at him. His voice trembled, but was indescribably determined. "As long as you are happy." The snow grew thicker. Looking at the large and small figure under the umbrella leaving, the old man on the turret had complicated emotions in his eyes. "Shui Wangshu's performance today is stunning," he said softly. He sighed softly. The student following him is indeed extraordinary. Huang Jinwei could not help but praise sincerely. Extraordinary. In the wind and snow, at the top of a pavilion closer to the camp, a woman in a white dress was also looking at Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning leaving. She was Yi Xiling. While her cultivation was higher than Liang Lian and Shui Wangshu, and she had only arrived at the last moment of the battle, the reality that Liang Lian was a cultivator above Realm 7 and Shui Wangshu's final blow still shocked her greatly. She looked at the large umbrella that disappeared into the wind and snow. She did not immediately leave, but pondered silently. This battle seemed to have reminded her of many things, and caused her to comprehend some things. Shui Wangshu and Liang Lian drew in primal energies of the universe, like they were moving mountains. This attracted the attention of many cultivators in Chongling. Most people wanted to see a battle between cultivators above Realm 7 with their own eyes. But those cultivators who did not know beforehand could not arrive as quickly as Yi Xiling. Many people had just confirmed the general location of the battle when the battle ended. A middle-aged man dressed as a scholar was quickly moving along the riverside winter forest towards the camp of the tiger and wolf army. At this time, he could no longer feel the powerful primal energies of the universe. Even the howling of the wind and snow seemed to have calmed. This middle-aged scholar stopped and sighed softly. 5 years ago, he had been a Realm 6 first-class cultivator. Yet after 5 years, he had not progressed and could not feel any of the mysteries of the mountain-moving realm. Today, when he felt the primal energies of the universe pass through the air like mountains, he had a feeling. He thought that if he could feel the full power of Realm 7 cultivators fighting at close range, maybe he could get a chance to have a breakthrough. But this chance flashed and disappeared. Even though he had chosen the most direct path, he was still very far from the camp. The battle there had already ended. In Chongling, maybe there was hope to see a simple spar or sword discussion between cultivators above Realm 7, but how many years would it take to see a true battle like this? Are you very regretful? It is a pity that this is fate. Even if there is a battle like this, you are not present, and you will lose your life. At this time, a cold voice sounded from the winter forest next to him. When he heard this voice, this middle-aged scholar suddenly felt a great sense of alarm and foreboding. He sensed that the cultivator who had spoken had been staying in this winter forest for a long time, but he had not sensed this person's existence before. A woman slowly appeared in his line of sight. Her figure was shrouded in the wind and snow. What made him even more anxious was that he could barely see the scenery in the wind and snow, but he could not see anything around her. "Who are you?" Thinking about it, it was impossible for him to have such an enemy, especially a woman whose cultivation was clearly above his own. This pale-faced, middle-aged scholar added in shock, "Did you recognize the wrong person? Are you not Nangong Shang, one of the disciples of the Bazin Kendo Ground Sword Storehouse?" The woman's cold voice sounded again. The middle-aged scholar seemed to have been bitten by a snake. His face turned snow-white, and his body unconsciously shrank back. His throat seemed to be gripped as he made a disbelieving sound. "You are a survivor of the Bazin Kendo Ground?" The woman shrouded in the wind and snow confirmed his identity. She did not seem to want to waste words with him. She said coldly and simply, "No, 5-goat pill."
"Not."
Nangong Shang stilled. He looked in incomprehension at the woman's figure and repeated, 5-goat pill." The woman said in displeasure, "I want the 5-goat pill recipe." 5-goat pill recipe? Nangong Shang was even more confused. "Just a pill recipe like this?" The woman said, "You do not know?" Nangong Shang suddenly felt a terrifying murderousness. His body froze slightly, and he said coldly, "The Nangong family has such a pill recipe, but it is not on me. Also, this pill recipe is one of the many pill recipes of the Nangong family. We do not usually use it. How can I remember it?" The woman seemed to know he would answer like this. She spoke quickly as though she was reciting a book. "Tell me where the pill recipe is in your family. If you lie, I will kill everyone in your family. I know you are a filial son, and take care of your mother. I think you do not want to see her head separated from her body." Nangong Shang suddenly grew furious and said harshly, "Who are you? Even if you are one of those great rebels, this is Chongling. Today, many cultivators are paying attention to the Tiger and Wolf Army camp. There are many important people here. Even if you can kill me, I do not believe you can escape after we fight." The woman shrouded in the wind and snow seemed to know what he was going to say. So she did not pause and said coldly, "Killing you here does not need to attract their attention." As she spoke, a strange coldness spread through the wind and snow in the winter forest. Nangong Shang looked up in shock. He saw the snow outside was still falling slowly and had not changed at all. Yet, when the falling snow was dozens of feet above his and the woman's heads, it seemed to accumulate on the ground, growing thicker and forming a curtain of snow. The entire winter forest was covered by this strange curtain of snow, as if it was a unique world. The wind and snow outside could not pass in, and even the primal energies of the universe could not pass in. This was a unique spirit formation. It was a spirit formation that was waiting for him to enter. Nangong Shang's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but he still had one last hope. He laughed harshly. "A very powerful formation, but the primal energies of the universe cannot enter. So what if you are a mountain-moving realm cultivator? I am Realm 6 First Class. How can you quickly defeat me?" The wind and snow around the woman suddenly disappeared. Nangong Shang's laughter suddenly stopped. He felt as if the space in front of him had lit up. What appeared in his line of sight was an extremely beautiful face. However, at this moment, a deep blue flame appeared in the hand of this excessively beautiful woman. His breathing suddenly stopped. It was just a little bit of aura, but he felt that the blood in his body seemed to be frozen. He felt that he was no match for it. The blue flame grew thicker and finally turned blue-black. 9 Hell King Sword. Seeing the final color of the other's life-bond sword and the blue ice particles floating in the air, Nangong Shang was dazed and howled like he had seen a ghost. Chapter 108. Nangong Shang's usually proud eyes only had the deepest terror left. As he screamed, he instinctively attacked with his sword, and all of his vital energy surged out of his body. The sword in the unusually beautiful woman's hand had taken form and revealed its true appearance. The color of this sword was so deep it was like the water of the deep sea and the darkest night had settled together. It was so deep that people would feel like they would be sucked into an endless abyss. The unusually beautiful woman showed a hint of anticipation and excitement on her cold face. She simply sent the sword forward. The sword and Nangong Shang were dozens of feet apart, but as the sword was sent out, countless blue ice grains fell on Nangong Shang's body. Nangong Shang trembled in terror. The cold air contained within these tiny ice grains directly caused the flow of true essence in his body to stagnate. His vital energy could not flow. How could he fight? At this time, he finally understood why the other was so fearless. Because the legends about this sword were true. Just being able to control this sword meant that she had Realm 7 power. Looking at the sword essence that came closer to him, he thought of more things. He was even more shocked and in disbelief. You are the eldest miss of the Gongsun family. How could you possibly cultivate this 9 King sword into a life sword? He used all of his strength to cry like a bullied child, and as if he had discovered a shocking secret, he shouted these 2 sentences. The 9 King sword was a vicious sword left behind by the Yu dynasty. Legend had it that this sword was made from the netherworld jade in the coldest place in the world. It was the coldest item in the world. In some myths and legends, weapons made from netherworld jade were not weapons of the human world. They were the weapons of the netherworld king and his netherworld generals. For cultivators, if the cold energy was too strong, it meant that it would harm their energies. So while this sword was one of the strongest swords in the world, it would be disadvantageous for cultivators to carry it for a long time, much less forge it into a life sword. However, the sword in front of his eyes was completely illogical. It had been refined into a natal sword. However, compared to the sword, what shocked Nangong Shang even more was the identity of this beautiful woman. In the present Chongling, there were almost no members of the Gongsun clan. Yet in the past Chongling, before the Yuanwu Emperor's bloody reform, the Gongsun clan had been the most prominent family in Chongling. Nangong Shang was a former disciple of the Bazin Kendo ground, and his status in the sect was higher than Feng Qianzhua's. The Bazin Kendo ground and that person who became a taboo, the Yuanwu Emperor, the Empress, and the 2 prime ministers wanted to completely erase him from the history of the Qin dynasty. Anyone who mentioned his name in Chongling would have their entire family wiped out. He was the staunchest supporter of that reform and the strongest backing. So Nangong Shang knew better than most of the present Chongling officials what had happened back then, and what path the Yuanwu Emperor had taken to ascend the throne. Hearing his shout, the unusually beautiful woman's expression turned cold. She had put away her sword, but the blue ice in the winter forest suddenly sped up and hit Nangong Shang's body with popping sounds. A layer of blue ice immediately formed on the surface of Nangong Shang's body, and he was unable to move. Why do you want to kill me? Since you are the eldest miss of the Gongsun family, you should not kill me.
Why?
Sensing the other's true killing intent, Nangong Shang, who knew he could not even draw his sword, used all his strength to squeeze out a shout. Because he knew the story he could not understand. When the Yuanwu Emperor used the Shang family to carry out the reform, he had not officially ascended the throne. In reality, he had firmly controlled the court. Yet because the new policies offended the interests of too many prestigious families, he still encountered unimaginable strong opposition. This kind of powerful struggle between the prestigious families and the court would not just threaten the throne of an emperor, but would cause a dynasty to quickly decline. At the time, some of the powerful prestigious families had started to borrow the power of other dynasties to fight against the Yuanwu Emperor. In the view of most people at the time, and even most of the officials in court loyal to the Yuanwu Emperor, the reform this time would not succeed. Yet the Yuanwu Emperor was an extraordinary person. Or rather, that person and many people who stood with that person were extraordinary. In that kind of situation, they did not hesitate at all and used the most ruthless and powerful methods as quickly as possible. The Yuanwu Emperor started with the most powerful Gongsun clan. Using the reason that the Gongsun clan had driven their horses and destroyed farmland, he punished them severely according to the new laws and executed them. When the Gongsun clan fought back, In one night, they used the army and countless cultivators to uproot the Gongsun clan from Chongling. That person and the famed swords of the Bazin Kendo ground were the true reason why the Gongsun clan could not fight back. The strongest cultivators of the Gongsun clan all died at the hands of that person that night. That night, all of Chongling's nobility were killed by a sword. In the legends, only the young miss of the Gongsun clan survived. That young miss had not been on good terms with her family and had been traveling outside. The Nine-Hell King sword had originally been in the hands of the Gongsun clan. Supposedly, she had taken it with her when she left the Gongsun clan. In the legends, the reason the eldest miss of the Gongsun family was not on good terms with her family was because she had some relationship with that person. The Gongsun family was a banner against the reform. How could they agree to her having an intimate relationship with that person? But no matter how unhappy they were, their family was still their family. The entire family had been destroyed at the hands of that person and the Yuanwu emperor. This eldest miss of the Gongsun family should hates that person and the Bazin Kendo ground greatly. In the process of the Yuanwu emperor destroying the Bazin Kendo ground, Nangongshang could be said to be a traitor of the Bazin Kendo ground. But if this beautiful woman was the eldest miss of the Gongsun family, she should not hate him, much less kill him. Because he had helped the Yuanwu emperor destroy the Bazin Kendo ground, he should be one of the people who helped the Gongsun family take revenge. You are the eldest miss of the Gongsun family. The Nine-Hell King sword is in your hands. Are you the eldest miss of the Gongsun family, or not? When the Bazin Kendo ground destroyed the Gongsun family, I was just a nobody in the Bazin Kendo ground. At the time, I was not even in Chongling. I also helped in the process of destroying the Bazin Kendo ground. So, why do you want to kill me? Why do you want to kill me? Because it was extremely difficult to understand. Nangongshang seemed to have gone mad as he repeatedly yelled out, "Do not waste so much words." The unusually beautiful woman said coldly, "I want to kill you as a sacrifice to the sword because you helped in the process of destroying the Bazin Kendo ground." Nangongshang could not understand. But before he could speak again, the unusually beautiful woman continued, "There are so many grievances in the past. How can they be sorted out? The Yuanwu emperor himself is the main culprit. You helped him when he destroyed the Bazin Kendo ground. Is there a reason for me to be grateful to you? Also, I want to kill you because this has nothing to do with me. I want to kill you because while I hate the people of the Bazin Kendo ground, I respect them. At least, their path has never changed. What they persisted in doing has never changed. I want to kill you because you're a lowly person. Just like how Emperor Yuanwu, who had walked down the same path with them, had suddenly stabbed them in the back. He was a truly vile person. What you've done makes me feel unfair and makes me feel unhappy. I want to kill you because I am displeased." The unusually beautiful woman said coldly and stubbornly, "For many people who have stepped into Realm 7, there are countless old grievances in the world that cannot be sorted out, especially in a place like Chongling where there are countless grievances. I do not care about grievances, I only care about pleasure." Nangongshang, whose entire body was stiff and unable to move, stared blankly at this exceptionally beautiful woman. Could a person really not care about grievances and only care about pleasure? Was it because his cultivation was not high enough, and he did not have enough experience that he could not care, or was it because that person and the many swords that had walked with him were broken and no longer existed in this world, so this woman could not care about grievances and only care about pleasure? He could not understand what this woman was truly thinking, but he was certain that she was more stubborn than anyone he had ever met. Therefore, his eyes were filled with pleading. "I will tell you the recipe for the 5-yang pill. Please do not harm my family," he forced out a voice and begged. "I did not want to kill your family to begin with." Ding Ning said this could force you to speak. Zhang Sun Qianxue thought coldly in her heart. However, her expression did not change. She nodded with her usual cold appearance and agreed to Nangongshang's request. Chapter 109. A cultivator dressed in purple robes landed outside the winter forest by the river. This cultivator was very young, with sharp brows and bright eyes. He was extremely handsome, and unlike ordinary handsome young people, he had a unique light. Just like Li Lingjuan's light, this light came from confidence, presence, birth, and many other factors, and had nothing to do with appearance. The purple robe on his body was completely different from ordinary clothes. It also emitted a dazzling light. Every thread seemed to be made of a unique material. It even gave people a feeling that every thread was a unique seal line that could help him absorb the energy of the world. There were no special decorations or markings on the purple robes, but this emptiness and the unique presence and light on the purple robes were the greatest signs. This was the sect robes of Lingshu Sword Gate. Min Mountain Sword Sect and Lingshu Sword Gate were two supreme sections. Only Realm 3 and above disciples qualified to leave the mountains. Otherwise, they could only stay in the mountains for the rest of their lives. Of all the disciples who could walk in the mortal world, only the direct disciples who had been personally appointed by the sect master qualified to wear the sect robes and walk outside. Every action, every word, and every battle represented the honor and disgrace of the sect. The direct disciples of Lingshu Sword Gate, who could represent the sect, were naturally not ordinary. While he had sensed a battle above Realm 7 and had not arrived in time, this winter forest in front of him did not seem to have any abnormalities. But looking at the winter forest by the river from a distance, he felt something was wrong. Now that he was close, he finally sensed what was wrong. This winter forest was too quiet. This silence did not mean that there was no sound of snow falling, but that the soft sounds were too singular. Countless snowflakes fell from the sky and landed in the forest. There were trees, dried branches, dried leaves, soil, stone. When the snow fell on these things, the sound was soft, but the sound was different. For a cultivator like him, if he listened carefully, the countless different subtle sounds should be a unique and mysterious piece of music, a natural symphony between heaven and earth. However, at this moment, the sound of snow falling was abnormally monotonous. It was as if every snowflake had landed on a carpet. The true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate, who had truly sensed where the abnormality came from, had an unusually grave expression. Such a formation represented an extremely powerful force. However, why would someone set up such a formation in this ordinary winter forest that was obviously used to conceal aura and sound? It was also at this moment that the winter forest in front of him suddenly emitted the sound of an eggshell cracking. Because this voice was too cold and concentrated, it made people feel mournful and even shudder. A clear sound of vibration rang out. A flying sword suddenly flew out from his sleeve. As if it had a life of its own, it rapidly revolved around his body. At the same time, the true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate subconsciously sent his psyche power into the forest where the power of the magic array had already disappeared. His expression suddenly changed. His body floated into the air along with the light purple flying sword. His movements were indescribably graceful. In a flash, his figure was deep in the forest. At this time, countless eggshell-like pieces of the snow curtain fell to the ground around him. His breathing suddenly stopped. In front of him stood a corpse that was already completely cold and hard. Official Nangong of the palace secretary. The moment he saw the face of this corpse, this true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate recognized the identity and exclaimed. His voice caused the surrounding air to vibrate. With this slight vibration, Nangong Shang's corpse gave off many soft cracking sounds. It was as though many dust particles were surging out of his body. In the next second, Nangong Shang's corpse collapsed right in front of him, turning into shattered pieces of ice on the ground. Who is it? This true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate paled. This was Chongling. Nangong Shang was an important official of the palace secretary. Also, the battle outside the north camp of the Tiger Wolf army must have attracted the attention of many powerful cultivators in Chongling, who dared to kill an important official of the Qin dynasty here. Also, what method was this to be able to form such cold energy that did not seem to belong to the mortal world? As these thoughts flashed through his mind, this true disciple of Lingshu Sword Gate did not hesitate. With a shout, the light purple flying sword around him seemed to burn and charged into the sky at a terrifying speed. There was a loud explosion. In the wind and snow above the winter forest, it was as if a purple flood dragon had suddenly appeared. Ding Ning's yellow-oiled paper umbrella was covered in snow and turned pure white. While most of his weight was on Ding Ning's shoulder, Xue Wangshu still felt that every strand of flesh in his body grew sore and his body grew colder. I've finally experienced what it's like for an ordinary old man to have one foot in the grave. This feeling is very fresh. To be able to experience this feeling at the end of my life instead of dying in battle, my life is more complete. Xue Wangshu struggled to breathe and said to Ding Ning, "Pity that starting from today until the Min Mountain Sword trials, I cannot be your support." Ding Ning shook his head and said, "No matter. Starting today, I have a greater support. Before the Min Mountain Sword trials, no one will dare to move against me." Xue Wangshu stilled slightly. "I do not understand." Ding Ning glanced at him and said, "You want to watch the Min Mountain Sword trials? Since the Empress has agreed and even mobilized such an important person today, she is fulfilling her promise. She wants everyone to know that she keeps her word. After your battle with Liang Lian today, many people will know that she keeps her word and that you want to watch the Min Mountain Sword trials next year. Unless they are stupid enough to die, they will be able to infer that you want to watch the Min Mountain Sword trials to see my performance. Since the Empress agreed to let you watch the Min Mountain Sword trials, of course, she will not let you have nothing to watch. So the Empress's agreement is not just for you, but also for me. Unless I seek death, I will live well before the Min Mountain Sword trials next year. She will be my greatest support before the Min Mountain Sword trials." Xue Wangshu looked at Ding Ning in admiration and said sincerely, "You really think further than me. But did you think further and have a carriage come to pick us up? We did not use a carriage when we came, but now we really need a carriage." Ding Ning glanced at him and did not respond. But Xue Wangshu stilled again. "I really admire you. Even if you cannot become a powerful cultivator, you will definitely become one of the best strategists," he praised from the bottom of his heart as he looked forward. In front of him, a carriage came out of the wind and snow, heading towards him and Ding Ning. The person driving the carriage was dressed in gray robes. It was Wang Taishu's subordinate, Jing Mazong. While all of Chongling was shrouded in wind and snow, the Empress study was still as warm as spring. A kind of slowly released primal energies of the universe caused the entire study to maintain a comfortable temperature for the human body. The flawless Empress sat calmly on the Phoenix throne. She did not go to see Liang Lian and Xue Wangshu's battle, but she knew the result before the cultivators who had hurried over. At his peak, but he cannot even defeat an old man like Xue Wangshu. He is brave and strong, but does not know how to combine strength and gentleness. Which Marquis in Chongling cannot easily defeat Xue Wangshu with one blow, and he wants to be made a marquis. A hint of cold disdain appeared on her perfect face. She ordered the palace attendant standing respectfully next to her. "Tell the family to tell him not to spend his efforts elsewhere. If he cannot contribute to the matter of Bai Shan Shui and the lonely mountain sword horde, he can only retire outside the pass." This palace attendant was not an ordinary palace attendant to be able to deliver such a message for her. At this time, this palace attendant who was about to leave sensed an unusual presence. She immediately reacted and knelt down. A look of genuine surprise appeared on the Empress's jade-like face. She gave a rare smile. At this time, she looked like a mortal woman, and not like a deity without normal emotions. She stood up and looked at the tall figure walking into the study. She asked gently, "Your Majesty, why have you come?" The person who could cause her to change like this was naturally the most noble of the Qin dynasty, the Emperor of the Qin dynasty. At this time, this emperor, who was the wisest and strongest in the eyes of his subjects, was not wearing a dragon robe, but an ordinary gray hemp robe. He even had stubble on his face that had not been groomed. However, even if he did not care about his appearance, there was still a majesty and bearing that ordinary people could not imagine between his eyebrows and his every move. Every breath he took and every step he took seemed to carry countless rivers and mountains with him. His figure was average, but he gave people the feeling of great height. Anyone, even if they closed their eyes, did not need to look at his appearance or clothing to be certain that he was the emperor of the Qin dynasty. Hearing the empress question, this emperor, who was the most powerful in the history of the Qin dynasty and the most loved by his subjects, did not answer her. Instead, he seemed to be thinking about something important. He glanced at her and then turned his head to look out the sky well above the spirit spring in the study. At the same time, he whispered, "Empress, do you think the 9 realms really exist? Can people really live forever?" Hearing his words, the empress' heart suddenly sank. Chapter 110. The wind and snow were furious. Chongling's heavy snow lasted for many days. Many Chongling cultivators even thought that this unusually long snow had a lot to do with Liang Lian and Shui Wangxiu moving large amounts of primal energies of the universe. The movement of large amounts of primal energies of the universe was enough to affect the weather for a while. In the memories of many older cultivators, in the battle before the Yuanwu Emperor's ascension to the Bazan Kendo ground, the astounding movement of primal energies of the universe caused the Ba Mountains to rain heavily for 3 months. The battle between Shui Wangxiu and Liang Lian once again proved that cultivators above Realm 7 were extraordinary existences. Compared to the fact that the Tiger and Wolf armies' General Liang Lian was a cultivator above Realm 7, Shui Wangxiu's strength shocked many cultivators in Chongling again. But in this snowstorm, there were many more shocking things that happened. An enormous fleet of armored ships unique to the Qin dynasty was braving the wind and snow as they sailed out of the Wei River port outside Chongling. A carriage was parked at the top of a tall hill outside the city, hidden in the wind and snow. The one driving the carriage was a deaf and mute old servant. The person in deep red robes sitting in the carriage was naturally one of the most powerful people in Chongling, Chief Inspector Chen of the Divinity Bureau. He still had a dispirited expression as he lifted the curtain and looked at the fleet coming out of the port. A black appeared on the snow path behind the carriage. The black slowly expanded. It was a black umbrella. The woman under the black umbrella wore a white dress. She had a scholarly air, and her waist was moving. She was very beautiful. A woman who could hold the black umbrella of the Bureau of Astrology and walk so calmly as she approached Bureau Chief Chen, naturally exuding a presence that could rival him, was the Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Astrology, Yi Xiling. Without any unnecessary opening remarks, Chief Inspector Chen, who had been watching the fleet from beginning to end, slowly said, "The one leading the fleet out to sea is Bureau Chief Su of the Bureau of Rites." In many stories of Chongling, the masters of the Astrology Bureau and the Divinity Bureau were mortal enemies. Even in the eyes of their closest subordinates, these two nobles usually fought openly and covertly. After many things, they had passed many swords to each other. But at this time, Yi Xiling, who walked to the side of the carriage with the black umbrella, had no hostility or killing intent in his eyes. She only frowned slightly, silently looking at the cold and mighty armored fleet that was breaking through the waves in the wind and snow. Searching for medicine overseas has been a tradition since the late emperor. That's why our Qin dynasty has such a huge warship that other dynasties don't have. Chief Inspector Chen glanced at her and continued. But ever since His Majesty had a breakthrough to Realm 7, his desire to search for medicine overseas has been especially urgent. It is unprecedented for you to conquer the island countries and open up many sea routes. This time, it is even more inconceivable for Bureau Chief Su to lead an army out to sea. Yi Xiling looked for a moment and said with a frown, "The ships are very deep in the water. They are carrying large amounts of goods. Even with thousands of students and soldiers, they will not be able to use them all in a short time." Chief Inspector Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. He said darkly, "It appears that this fleet will not return for a while." Yi Xiling slowly nodded and said, "Bureau Chief Su is one of His Majesty's most trusted people." Chief Inspector Chen took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He said softly, You mean that something has happened to His Majesty's cultivation, so he has an even greater need for spirit medicines. Yi Xiling shook his head. The Deer Mountain Conference is near. He has already passed Realm 7 and has reached Realm 8. This is enough for the 3 dynasties to renew their alliance. Before the Deer Mountain Conference, he will only use the safest cultivation method. He will not take any risks. So there will not be any problems with his cultivation. Chief Inspector Chen thought for a long time with a bowed head. His eyes flashed with an unusual light. You say that there will not be any problems with his cultivation. You mean that there will not be any problems with his present cultivation and body. He looked up at Yi Xiling. Then it should be that he feels there is a problem with the next realm. Yi Xiling's eyes narrowed slightly. Then this is the greatest problem. Other people might only know that the Yuanwu Emperor was strong, but not how strong the Yuanwu Emperor was. But she and Chief Inspector Chen were among the group of people who understood the Yuanwu Emperor the best in Chongling. So she was certain that the Yuanwu Emperor had reached Realm 8. To such a heaven-defying expert, encountering difficulties and insurmountable obstacles on the path of cultivation wasn't the biggest problem. An existence like him possessed the strength of an entire dynasty, and he could slowly climb up even the tallest mountain. The greatest problem was that he could not see the tall mountain. He could not sense the next realm, or rather, he could not sense the path to the next realm. This was the greatest problem. Above Realm 8 was longevity, the legendary Realm 9. If even an existence like the Yuanwu Emperor was confused about the path ahead and started to doubt this Realm 9, then who in the world could reach Realm 9? Yi Xiling and Chief Inspector Chen sank into deep silence. A long time later, when the mighty armored fleet had completely disappeared into the wind and snow, Chief Inspector Chen spoke first. That day, when Xue Wangxiu and Liang Lian fought, in a river forest 10 miles from the North Tiger and Wolf Camp, a cultivator died. He was Nangong Shang of the Palace Historian Bureau. Yi Xiling immediately frowned deeply. I know that you were near the Tiger and Wolf Army at the time. The reason you did not detect it was because the one who killed him was the 9 Hell King sword. Chief Inspector Chen glanced at her and said. Yi Xiling stilled, strange emotions flowing through his eyes. So even she has appeared in Chongling and can use the power of the 9 Hell King sword? No, one of the Astrology Bureau did not know that someone like Nangong Shang was killed. Chief Inspector Chen looked down at his slightly yellow fingernails and said softly, Does the Astrology Bureau have any clues about that person's heir? Yi Xiling turned around, looked at him and said coldly, If there is, I would have told you. Why do you have such a question? This is different from the past. Chief Inspector Chen looked up and met her gaze. He said with difficulty, In the past, in the eyes of everyone in Chongling, including the Holy One and the Empress, we were irreconcilable enemies. If they have such thoughts, they will feel that we are easier to control and deal with. Then we can live better in Chongling. But this time is really different because that person is involved this time, and I understand you better than anyone else, so even I do not have much confidence. You fear that I will do something stupid and drag you down with me? You do not need to worry like this. Everything is too far away. This is the 11th year of Yuanwu of the Qin dynasty. Yi Xiling looked at him and said coldly. Then she turned and left without another word, quickly disappearing into the wind and snow. Chief Inspector Chen looked at the long trail of footprints she left behind that slowly disappeared in the wind and snow. His expression was even more desolate and dispirited. He slowly shook his head and sighed. I understand what you mean. That person has been dead for more than a decade. Everything should have been decided. Many of the principles of the previous dynasty do not work now. But everyone knows that many things are still there. I fear that you will use the things of the previous dynasty to do the present things. The snow was falling heavily. Thick snow had accumulated in front of the doors of Chongling. In the streets around Falling Parasol, every family was sweeping the snow in front of their doors. Ding Ning, holding a shovel, was one of them. You do not care about the wine shop's business. Why waste this effort? Looking at Ding Ning, who was working hard to shovel the snow, Xue Wangxiu, who was sitting on a chair under the eaves, warming himself by the fire, wearing thick cotton robes and a large weasel fur hat. He looked slightly comical. Hearing his words, Ding Ning straightened and said, "This is not the same. Everyone is sweeping the snow, but I am not sweeping. When the snow stops and many carriages pass, the dirty water from the snow will flow to people's doors. I am sweeping the snow now because everyone is sweeping the snow." Shui Wangshu stilled. "I do not understand such a simple principle." After a long pause, he said emotionally, "No wonder some cultivators have to cultivate in the mortal world. Some small things in the mortal world usually contain many great principles." After the battle with Liang Lian, Ding Ning stubbornly did not have him return to White Goat Cave. Instead, he had Wang Taishu help him rent a courtyard in Falling Parasol. Now, he increasingly felt that Ding Ning's actions were correct. Since he had returned to being an ordinary old person, he naturally had to live like an ordinary old person and experience a life he did not have in the past. Cave Master. However, a cry that sounded like it was about to cry broke the mood. A tall figure swept in from the side of the alley, like the wind. With a plop, the figure fell in front of him and placed both hands on his knees. "Cave Master, why did you have to fight a general? You are like this now, what can we do?" The newcomer's face was covered in tears, and his expression was unspeakably benevolent. It was the eldest sect brother of White Goat Cave, Zhang Yi. Shui Wangshu did not know whether to laugh or cry. But looking at this sincere student, he sighed in the end. "You are not dead. Why are you crying? Get up." Zhang Yi rose, but hearing this, he still couldn't help but sob. How could he not cry? A few days ago, he was still a Realm 7 cave master. Today, he had become an ordinary old man with one foot in the grave. He couldn't even withstand the cold. At this time, another proud young person appeared at the alley Zhang Yi had entered. This was a youth from Guangzhou who carried a purple sword on his back. Behind him was a slightly plump middle-aged merchant with an amiable face. This youth from Guangzhou walked quickly towards Ding Ning. Chapter 111. It appears there is trouble. Shui Wangshu noticed this youth, and then laughed. From Guangzhou. Hearing Shui Wangshu's words, Zhang Yi, with tear stains on his face, turned around. Seeing the youth walking quickly over, he stilled and asked in puzzlement, "Cave Master, how do you know he is from Guangzhou?" Guangzhou is the origin of the Qin dynasty. Only the cultivators of that place have less beauty than the cultivators of Chongling when they carry their swords. It is like carrying a hoe or an axe for chopping wood, Shui Wangshu said with a smile. Zhang Yi looked at the youth walking over. He was bold, but there was something wrong with the angle of the sword on his back. It looked like a hoe on his back. There was no beauty. He felt that Shui Wangshu's words were too interesting, and his tears turned into laughter. The youth with the purple sword stopped when he was dozens of feet from Ding Ning. He bowed slightly and said, "This one is Shun Yi from Guangzhou. Sir should be Ding Ning of White Goat Cave?" Hearing that the other was from Guangzhou, Zhang Yi almost laughed out loud with tears on his face. Ding Ning leaned on the snow shovel and asked coldly, "What?" Shun Yi stilled. While he had always been in Guangzhou and had never been to Chongling, from the books and the words of the people around him, he knew that Chongling valued etiquette more than Guangzhou. Yet, the two people opposite him, one of them was crying and laughing at the same time. This Ding Ning did not seem to have a good expression. He came from afar. Even if you do not invite him to drink hot tea, you should be more polite. Looking at the slightly frozen Shun Yi, Shui Wangshu shook his head and scolded Ding Ning in a low voice. "You came to fight. You can't even prepare for the new year by sweeping the snow. There is no need for politeness." Ding Ning glanced at him and said. Shun Yi was even more stunned. He looked hesitantly at Ding Ning and asked, "How did you know I came to fight you?" "I came to challenge you? Other than Xiero and Xie Chongsheng, I do not know anyone from Guangzhou." Ding Ning looked at him and said, "Thinking about it, it's all because of them. When you walked in, you were full of fighting spirit. If you didn't come to fight with me, did you come to help me sweep the snow?" Shun Yi was startled for a moment, his expression quickly becoming dignified. "You're really smart, truly extraordinary." Truth be told, I fell in love with Xiero at first sight. When I heard that she swore she would marry only you, I wanted to challenge you. I have been in Chongling for half a month, and coincidentally, you were out. Only today did I confirm you were here, and came to find you. Before Ding Ning could speak, he said with undisguised seriousness. Shui Wangshu laughed even more happily. As expected of Guanzhong. You are not embarrassed to speak of such matters of jealousy. Ding Ning looked at this youth he did not dislike. He frowned slightly and said, How you feel about Xiero has nothing to do with me. You know, that is just Xiero's own thoughts. Shunyi also frowned and said sincerely, But I think if I can prove that I am better than you, she may change her mind. Ding Ning said calmly, What does that have to do with me? This is between you and her. Do you want me to fight with you and help you prove that you are better than me? What benefit do I have? Shunyi stilled again. In his view, this was a simple matter. As long as he found Ding Ning, they could start a fair fight. But when he heard Ding Ning's words, he did not have any words to refute. This seemed to be a matter that only benefited him, and not Ding Ning. Looking at this stunned him. Ding Ning, who had no interest in fighting, opened his mouth and wanted to say something to make the other give up on this idea. But at this time, Shui Wangshu behind him coughed softly and said like a child, Ding Ning, I want to see you fight. Ding Ning paused and did not speak. Shunyi's eyes immediately shone with hope. The slightly fat merchant behind him also coughed softly. He looked at Ding Ning and said in a deliberative tone, If you feel there is no benefit to you, maybe we can give some compensation? Ding Ning thought for a moment and said, Okay. Shunyi immediately grew excited. Little sect brother, this is not good, right? Zhang Yi, with tears on his face, had a bitter expression. He had never heard of one side giving compensation to the other in a duel in Chongling. This was not a street performer who had to give tips. I want 3 on grass. Ding Ning did not care about his opinion. He looked at Shunyi and the slightly fat merchant behind him and said, Of course, if I win, you will give me 3 on grass. If I lose, there is no need. Shunyi instinctively turned his head and asked the slightly fat merchant behind him, Uncle Jean, what is 3 on grass? The slightly fat merchant responded softly, A spirit medicine that can strengthen the spleen and kidney. The price is not low, but it can still be found. Shunyi was immediately overjoyed. He looked at Ding Ning and said, Your request is not excessive, and the condition is to win against me. Since that is the case, if you can win against me, the Shun family will give you as many 3 on grass as we can find. Ding Ning nodded calmly. This is good. Shui Wangshu, who was behind him, was a bit worried. He asked softly, What are you using the 3 sungrass for? Did you see a pill recipe that is beneficial to your body? Is this pill recipe reliable? Ding Ning turned to look at him and said, It is reliable, do not worry. Seeing Ding Ning so certain, Shui Wangshu chuckled and did not say anything else. Shunyi grew excited and asked, Then can we start now? Ding Ning put down the shovel in his hand and wiped his hands. He saw Zhang Yi, whose tears were about to form frost, standing next to Shui Wangshu. He took 2 steps forward in the snow and then said to Shunyi, Yes. Shunyi gripped the hilt of the purple longsword on his back. He looked at Ding Ning and asked softly, You have not reached vital energy realm? Ding Ning looked strangely at him and nodded. Please. Shunyi did not say anything else. According to Chongling's etiquette, he pulled out his sword and held it across his chest. Ding Ning's expression became absolutely calm again. He did not speak. He gripped the hilt of the last flower sword, pulled it out of its ordinary sheath, and held it across his chest. The people sweeping the snow in the streets grew excited. The neighbors here all knew that the owner of the wine shop, Ding Ning, had become a cultivator. While their initial excitement had passed, seeing such a battle, they naturally wanted to see what little boss Ding Ning, who had become a cultivator, could do. Do not be afraid. Fight well. Do not embarrass our falling parasol. If you win, I do not want your noodles money tomorrow. Countless voices rang out. Among the voices, Shunyi's eyebrows rose slightly when he saw Ding Ning did not attack first. A sharp aura suddenly flashed across his determined face. All the chaotic shouts suddenly stopped. Shen Yi attacked at this time. He swung his sword at Ding Ning. He and Ding Ning were at least 50 feet apart. When he swung his sword, he should not have been able to touch Ding Ning's body. But as he swung his sword, his figure flashed quickly. The remaining snow between him and Ding Ning was turned to powder by a powerful force and spread outwards. In the blink of an eye, he had already traversed a distance of over 30 meters and arrived in front of Ding Ning. The golden seal scripts on his sword lit up. Threads of energy seeped out of the blade and formed true golden lightning. The poor families of Falling Parasol had never seen such a scene of lightning and thunder coming out of a sword. They were stunned. But when they saw the golden lightning jump out of the purple sword, Zhang Yi, standing next to Shui Wangshu, stared with wide eyes and praised apologetically. A true gentleman. I have judged a gentleman with my own yardstick. The reason why he gave such praise was because when he heard Chen Yi ask about Ding Ning's cultivation, he thought that Chen Yi had determined that Ding Ning had not yet reached the true element boundary, which was why he had acted so confidently. But now, he found that Shen Yi was so certain of Ding Ning's cultivation because he did not want to take advantage of Ding Ning in terms of vital energy. At this moment, he had only suppressed his strength to the peak of the second realm for the strike. Ding Ning frowned slightly. The moment Shen Yi attacked, he had sensed Shen Yi's intentions. But in his view, this would have no effect on the result of this battle. If it could make victory easier, he would not refuse. So when Shen Yi advanced, his physical energy furiously flooded into the last flower remnant, sword in his hand. White seal lines formed on both sides of his body. He did not even take a step back. He had waited for Shen Yi to attack first to lock down Shen Yi's sword move. In a flash, the wind and lightning were in front of him. The golden lightning was less than a foot away from his chest. But in this moment, two sword seals formed as the remnant sword in his hand spun quickly and formed on his sides. There was a loud explosion. Two powerful balls of indigo energy formed out of thin air. There seemed to be two green mountains rising and closing in front of Ding Ning. The golden lightning was unable to advance even an inch between the two green mountains that formed the two sides of the lake. White Goat's Sword Seal Manual. Little sect brother. Little sect brother. Zhang Yi's eyes were wide. He was pleasantly surprised and in disbelief. He could only repeat, little sect brother. Shen Yi's breathing suddenly stopped. He felt as if the sword in his hand was being squeezed by two green mountains. It could not move forward at all, nor could it be pulled back. A buzzing sound was heard. In the next instant, countless green yuan qi rebounded and shot in front of him. His body shook violently, as if he had been hit by a giant hammer, and his entire person retreated in dejection. At this time, Ding Ning swung his sword upwards. A square white sword seal immediately formed. Even colder energy formed in the icy air. A patch of ice passed through the scattering golden threads and passed over Shen Yi's head. Ding Ning put his sword away. He did not say anything. However, everyone understood the meaning behind this. The outcome of this battle had been decided. If Ding Ning was willing, just now, that patch of ice trees could charge at the retreating Shen Yi. Little sect brother. Zhang Yi was overjoyed at the result. He did not know what to say and could only call out softly. Shui Wangshu sighed softly. Too fast. He seemed to be unsatisfied and dissatisfied. Chapter 112. Shui Wangshu said too fast, but to the two from Guangzhong, it had a completely different meaning. Too fast. The chubby merchant's expression was grave. The sword seal path was an uncommon method and too difficult for ordinary cultivators. It was hard to imagine that a cultivator of Ding Ning's age could complete two sword seals in the time it took for Shen Yi to charge more than 100 feet. This is the sword seal path. When Shen Yi heard the chubby merchant's voice, he awoke from his momentary absent-mindedness. He didn't feel the pain or shame of his defeat at all. Instead, he fell into a deep shock. How could you be so fast? Even if you are born with a delicate temperament, It generally takes several years before you can achieve anything in the Tao of Sword Talismans. Moreover, the sword talisman you just used was not the simplest of sword talismans. Ding Ning ignored the shock of the two from Guanzhong. He glanced at Shun Yi and said simply and directly, "I am not an ordinary cultivator." Shun Yi stilled. At this time, Shui Wangxiu, who was sitting under the eaves, became angry and shouted, "What and what? I said too fast, Ding Ning, you finished too fast." Ding Ning, don't you know that after you don't have to think about cultivation every day, your time seems to be extra long and extra long? Can't you fight a few more moves? Hearing his angry shout, Ding Ning turned around and said with a frown, "Your demands are a bit high." Zhang Yi, standing respectfully next to Shui Wangxiu, could not help but say softly, "Cave Master, this does not seem good. You told me before that I have to use my full power in battle. This is to respect my opponent. Also, little sect brother is young. If I hold back, what if he does not control it well and injures himself?" Hearing Zhang Yi's words, Shui Wangxiu grew even angrier. He raised his hand and looked like he was going to hit. "Zhang Yi, I taught you so much about respecting your teachers, and now you dare to lecture me?" Zhang Yi immediately sweated. He bowed in terror and said, "This disciple does not dare. So, I was a frog in a well in Guanzhong." Hearing the words of Shui Wangxiu and Zhang Yi, Shen Yi blushed slightly. Then he bowed solemnly to Ding Ning and said seriously, "Thinking about it now, just now, the speed of the sword seal path and the timing of the two sword seals were perfect. From the start, you knew that I was not a match for you and found it troublesome, so you were unwilling to fight with me. I expected that Xiero swore that you would be exceptional in some way, but I had not expected the difference between us to be so great." Looking at this youth who was neither servile nor overbearing and had the style of Guanzhong, and then turning to look at the furious Shui Wangxiu, Ding Ning thought and said, "You did not use your full power." Shun Yi said, "You have cultivated for a shorter time than me, and your cultivation progress is faster than mine. Even if I suppress my cultivation to the same level as yours, I have cultivated the sword longer than you, and I still have the advantage." Ding Ning shook his head and said, "I do not mean that. You deliberately suppressed your cultivation, and naturally, you were restrained and did not fight to your heart's content." Shen Yi did not understand Ding Ning's meaning and stilled. "I will wait for your 3 young grass." Ding Ning said calmly, "In a few days, I should be able to reach Realm 3. At that time, my cultivation will be close to yours. If you are willing, I will fight with you again. You will not have to be restrained, and can use your sword essence to its fullest." "That is more like it." Hearing Ding Ning say this, Shui Wangxiu's anger disappeared like a child and he smiled. Shen Yi felt that he should be happy. He did want to fight to his heart's content, but he felt that something was not right and felt it was strange. Zhang Yi spoke at this time and said with a frown, "Little sect brother, it is not as simple as you think. While you are close to a breakthrough is not something you can do just because you want to. Little sect brother, the people of Guanzhong are straightforward. It is not good for you to lie to him." Chun Yi suddenly raised his head. Only then did he realize what was wrong. There was a great barrier from energy refinement realm to vital energy realm. It was related to comprehending and taking in primal energies of the universe. Many people were stuck at this barrier their entire lives. How could a person in energy refinement realm say he would reach vital energy realm soon, and then really reach vital energy realm soon? You do not need to believe now. Ding Ning was still calm. He looked at Shun Yi and said, "You can think of it as my suggestion. If I can reach vital energy realm soon, I will fight with you again. If I cannot, then I will owe you." Facing Ding Ning's calm gaze, Shen Yi nodded and said, "I will wait for your news. Also, the Shen family will send the 3 young grass you on you as soon as possible." Ding Ning bowed in thanks. "Many thanks." Shen Yi nodded, put his sword on his back, and turned to leave. Waves of cheers and shouts could be heard from behind him. At the entrance to the alley, Shen Yi's footsteps suddenly became heavy. The heaviness of his footsteps represented his heavy mood. "Uncle Jean?" He didn't turn around and said softly, even though his senior brother scolded him that it was impossible to determine the time he would take to break through from the second realm to the third realm, and that it couldn't be too fast. For some reason, I feel that he really can break through very quickly. His gaze was too calm and too confident. Is he really like those rare monsters of Lingshu Sword Gate and Min Mountain Sword Sect, born with a unique perception of the primal energies of the universe, and he does not need to waste any time on this barrier? The slightly fat merchant grimaced. He hesitated but still said, I feel the same as you. If he really is as he says and is not an ordinary cultivator, if he really is a monster, I worry that you will never be able to prove that you are stronger than him. I only hope that you will not be discouraged. Father always told me to stand straight when beaten and to accept defeat when willing to bet. There are too many capable people in the world, and it is impossible to win all of them. But in this life, the only thing a person cannot lose to is themselves. Shun Yi's hands trembled slightly, but his expression grew even more determined. A hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. This youth looks really good. If this was a child of a noble family in Chongling, they would not behave like this after losing. Shui Wangshu looked at Shun Yi's figure that disappeared into the alley and said excitedly, Ding Ning, how about you make a bet with him next time and have him call himself a student of White Goat Caves? Ding Ning glanced at him and said, White Goat Caves' present situation is not good. Shui Wangshu's expression froze. He said with a worried frown, actually, it is not so bad. Green Vine Sword Academy is still standing. Zhang Yi had been hesitating all this time. He finally gathered his courage and looked at Ding Ning. Little sect brother, in the coming days, I will use the White Goat Spirit Vein to cultivate. Eldest senior sect brother, why don't you help me take care of Cave Master and take him to places he wants to go? Before he could say anything, Ding Ning looked at him and said. Zhang Yi paused and then nodded helplessly. All right. While the Qin dynasty was stimulated by the law of rewards for military merit, and the people were brave and did not flee in fear when they saw cultivators fight, they would flock to watch. But the people of different places were still different in subtle ways. For example, the Zheng City Zhushan district that Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had visited before was weak and timid. They were always on tenterhooks, afraid that something bad would happen. The people of Guanzhong were the most bold and violent. Most cultivators used the sword like a blade or an axe, slashing or chopping. They valued their lives but their promises. Death warriors were the most common in Guanzhong. If Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning had gone to a small city in Guanzhong and the entire city was an enemy, Shui Wangshu and Ding Ning would have had to slaughter the entire city before they could charge out or be killed inside. Chongling was the place where the nobility of the Qin dynasty were the most intertwined. The people of Chongling were more moderate and were the most cautious and weighed the pros and cons in their actions. They weighed too many things, and their personalities were more feminine, or rather, more vicious. So Shui Wangshu's sigh was not without reason. Among the students of many cultivation places, the young geniuses who came from Chongling had too much darkness in their eyes and not enough magnanimity. How could such a personality express the magnanimity and straightforwardness of the sword manuals that dominated the Qin dynasty? But the sword essence of some sword sects in Chongling did not walk a straight path, but a strange and varied path. For example, the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave. The Shadow Mountain Sword Cave's gates were in the Shadow Mountain to the north of Chongling. Most of the buildings of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave, and some of the sword caves left behind from the earliest times, were on the sunny side of the Shadow Mountain. But because the exteriors of these buildings were a gloomy gray and black, they looked like balls of shadow. Ku Shichuan was in one of these balls of shadow. He was sitting cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was a gloomy and smooth mountain wall. This mountain wall was like a piece of shadow. There were countless sword marks of different depths on the gloomy gray wall. These sword marks appeared irregular and unusually complicated. Sitting in front of this smooth mountain wall, Ku Shichuan had been silently comprehending for an unknown period of time. His body was covered in dust, and he did not have his usual bearing. A middle-aged teacher dressed in deep gray robes silently walked up behind him. Looking at Ku Shichuan, who looked like a withered flower, this middle-aged teacher with a benevolent face couldn't help but sigh softly. He said, "Actually, you do not need to be so radical. No matter how much you comprehend from the Shadow Sword Wall, you may not be able to win at the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I have received news that the youth of the Dugu family has returned from the Mabe to attend the trials." Chapter 113. Dugu Bai's. Ku Shichuan's haggard face grew paler, and his pupils contracted into black wells. He was publicly recognized as the student of Shadow Mountain Sword Cave who progressed the fastest in the last few decades. He had reached profound understanding in a month, and had reached Realm 2 energy refinement in 3 months. At this time, he was in the first class of Vital Energy Realm. Because of this unimaginable speed, he was famed in Chongling and stood out among all the students who had come to watch the Sword Trial Festival that day. Starting many months ago, he had been allowed to come to this Shadow Sword Wall to study and cultivate. But other than the 2 monsters, and Baosher of Lingshu Sword Gate and Jing Liuli of Min Mountain Sword Sect, he knew very well that among all the young geniuses of Chongling, there were several people he could not reach. Dugu Bai was one of those people. Dugu Bai's father, Dugu Liangsheng, was the youngest of the 13 marquises of the Qin dynasty. The bloodline of the Dugu clan was rather unique. Dugu Liangsheng's situation was exactly the same as the previous generations of the Dugu clan. When he was young, his body was weak and sickly. Often, when he was 12 or 13 years old, he was still a pot of medicine. However, when he was 14 or 15 years old, his body had matured. It was not just that their breakthroughs were fast, but also that the people of the Dugu family had unexpected comprehension and use of simple sword forms. Some of the most ordinary sword moves could be used to great power in their hands. When the Dugu family was made a marquis of Dugu Liangsheng, their power naturally reached its peak. Dugu Bai's fate naturally became different from all the other members of the Dugu family. If this was someone else, they might have searched for spirit medicines and famous doctors so that Dugu Bai would not be sickly in childhood, or his body would mature earlier. However, Dugu Liangsheng had his own considerations. He did not use any method of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm. Instead, he sent several of his most trusted family generals and servants to take Dugu Bai on a journey from a young age. Not only did they go to famous mountains and great rivers, they even went to all kinds of desolate and cold places, to all kinds of battlefields. In Dugu Liangsheng's words, this was using the primal energies of the universe, battle energy and battle souls as medicine, and the heavens to nurture people. Regardless of whether or not his words had cultivation reasoning and basis, his actions were very effective. Dugu Bai's environment was clearly worse than any of the other members of the Dugu family, but his sickly body grew stronger quickly. The large amounts of experience in childhood seemed to give him better instincts for using the sword. The most important thing was, even though his body had matured at about the same time as all the other members of the Dugu family in the past, when he was 13 or 14 years old, he was only about the height of an ordinary person who was 12 years old. However, his strong body, without using too much medicine, allowed his psychokinesis to exceed that of ordinary people. Legend had it that the movements of the people in front of Dugu Bai's eyes would be slower than the movements of ordinary people. Just a bit slower, but in a battle between cultivators of similar levels, was a great difference. Ku Shichuan knew he was not as good as Dugu Bai because he had seen Dugu Bai fight. In that battle, Dugu Bai used the simplest, long river cut to defeat a cultivator of slightly higher cultivation than him. Even now, when he thought back to that scene, Ku Shichuan could not understand how Dugu Bai was able to use such a move to defeat the other's exquisite sword move. What he could not understand was the great difference. Ku Shichuan knew that this sect uncle called Li Mayan was doing this for his own good. Usually, this sect uncle of high status in the sect had taught him many times. But he still shook his head lightly. Seeing him shake his head, Li Mayan immediately frowned and said, "I admire your determination and perseverance. But the reason that the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave has a rule that only Realm 4 second-class cultivators can enter the Forbidden Grounds and comprehend the Shadow Sword Wall is because many of the sword essences on the Shadow Sword Wall are too sharp, like the mental power of the Elders. Also, many of the sword marks contain primal energies of the universe, just like seal scripts. They will naturally gather some primal energies of the universe. Students like you, who have not reached the required cultivation level, if you cultivate here for too long, your mind and body will be injured by the Shadow Sword Wall. I know your intentions. Ku Shichuan looked up and said respectfully, but my interest in cultivation comes from my pride. Li Mayan said in puzzlement, What do you mean? Ku Shichuan said softly and sincerely, I do not know how you feel as a powerful cultivator, but for me, I really like the gazes of the people around me when they see me. They are envious, admiring, and even looking up to me. I like this feeling, so at least for many years before me, the motivation that supported me to work hard and endure loneliness came from this. Li Mayan frowned and said, This kind of feeling is abnormal. You should think further because we are cultivators that surpass mortals and not those girls in the brothels of Chongling. Our strength and cultivation should not be like their beauty and clothing, and just want to attract admiring gazes. Sect uncle, I understand what you say. Ku Shichuan said respectfully and sincerely, cultivators should have higher pursuits, and not just try to be more beautiful than others in front of others. But I have read in many cultivation books that the best method of cultivation comes from the heart. The feeling that can stimulate one's cultivation the most is the best method. Li Mayan thought silently about Ku Shichuan's words and felt they were reasonable. I know I cannot compare to people like Enbausher, Jinglioli, and Dugubai, but at least in front of other people, I must stand out. Ku Shichuan said calmly. Also, when I went to the Green Vine Sword Academy to watch the ceremony, that wine shop youth from White Goat Cave called Ding Ning did make me feel threatened. His performance caused me to be humiliated in front of those people. The wine shop youth's threat and humiliation were the strongest form of stimulation for me. If I cannot comprehend anything here with this influence, then before I reach Realm 4 second class, I will not be able to comprehend anything here. Also, my pride does not allow me to lose to a youth who has just started cultivating. No matter how good his aptitude is, he started much later than me. Even if I don't lose to him, even if I can't make him look up to me, I can't comment on him wantonly from a high position. I won't feel good, and the greatest motivation that supports my cultivation will disappear. So, sect uncle, please do not stop me. Ku Shichuan knelt on the ground and bowed deeply to Li Mayan. She begged, as long as I can obtain any benefit here, I do not care how much pain and torture I have to endure. Li Mayan thought of the recent matters of Ding Ning and Shui Wangxiu, and then looked at Ku Shichuan's present state. He sighed softly and did not speak. When the footsteps of this sect uncle, who was concerned about her, gradually faded away, Ku Shichuan slowly stood up from the ground. He faced the Shadow Sword Wall again and sat up straight. The Shadow Sword Wall was not left behind by the predecessors of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave, but a relic from an unknown ancient cultivation place. The earliest group of cultivators of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave had discovered the Shadow Sword Wall and spent great effort to transport it to the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave because everyone was certain that the cultivator who had left behind these sword marks was of a much higher cultivation than them. The Shadow Mountain Sword Cave was not a first-class sect in Chongling, but the sect where this Shadow Sword Wall once belonged to was definitely a first-class sect. Ever since they obtained this Shadow Sword Wall, the direct disciples of each generation of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave would spend large amounts of time to study it. Yet, in these hundreds of years, only 3 people had comprehended the true meaning from here. One of them, Chu Li, had comprehended the strongest sword manual of the Shadow Mountain Sword Cave, the Flowing Shadow Sword Manual. The other 2 had become grandmasters of their generation who had successfully reached Realm 7. One of them, Song Hanshan, had comprehended a cold mountain sword seal here. The other, Xiao Yinyu, had comprehended many important things about primal energies of the universe here. She had only taken a few nights to break through from Realm 5 to Realm 6. Ku Shichuan knew that his talent was not lacking compared to the other three, and he did not ask for explosiveness like the other three. As long as he could obtain several exquisite sword moves, even if they could make his vital energies circulate faster and gather more primal energies of the universe on his sword, he would be satisfied. However, he had already sat here for more than 30 days, relying on his willpower to hold on. The sword marks in his eyes were still extremely messy. No matter if it was just looking at a single sword mark, looking at a patch of sword marks, or looking for sword marks of similar depth to search for the connection between them, he had used all kinds of methods, but he still did not comprehend anything. Li Mayan was right. The shadow sword wall was very damaging to the mind and the body. At this time, he bowed deeply on the ground and stood up. He looked at the countless sword marks in front of him. His head sank, and his hands outside his sleeves started to uncontrollably tremble. He felt something was wrong, and wanted to pull his gaze away from the shadow sword wall. Yet, with this movement, he felt his vision darken, and there was a sweetness in his throat. With a pop, he uncontrollably spat out a mouthful of blood. Vomiting blood from looking at a sword wall, you can be considered the first person in all of history. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Ku Shichuan's mind did not immediately think of his own body. Instead, the faces of Xie Chongsheng and Ding Ning appeared in his mind. He imagined Xie Chongsheng and Ding Ning mocking him by his side. Pop, his breathing became even more irregular, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. The warm blood sprayed on the shadow sword wall in front of him, and countless tiny droplets of blood slowly flowed down. Many droplets of blood fell into the deep and wide sword marks, but only caused the sword marks to be slightly colored. Yet Ku Shichuan's eyes suddenly lit up like stars. On the shadow sword wall in front of him, several extremely thin but bright red lines appeared. Chapter 114. A black door opened from the inside. Wang Taishu, dressed in white fox fur robes, walked out and stepped onto the carriage waiting at the door. In the hall inside the door, the dozen gangsters of Chongling looked at his back and were speechless. Dozens of days ago, this master of two-level tower was just in existence on par with them. Yet, dozens of days later, the other had the strong support of the warden's office. The warden's office had used a series of unusually powerful methods to help him pave the way in Chongling. From now on, many of the rules of Chongling streets would be set by him. The people present more or less knew the story behind that bloody night. In their view, seizing some territory and benefits from the hands of common people was not much, but daring to seize territory from the hands of the warden's office was enough to make them feel respect and awe. Stepping into the carriage, Wang Taishu rubbed the acupuncture points on the sides of his head. He leaned tiredly against the cushion and closed his eyes to rest. It was not a simple matter to set rules and divide territory for these gangsters of Chongling. Also, he knew that if he wanted to gain a foothold, he could not rely on threatening others. He had to make people feel that he had done better than anyone else in the past. It was nearing the end of the year. The streets of Chongling were more lively than at any other time. There were happy children running through the streets. Even the dilapidated falling parasol was decorated with lanterns and banners, adding to the festive atmosphere. Ding Ning saw Wang Taishu's carriage appear at the entrance to the alley and went to greet it. After sitting down in his usual seat in the carriage, Ding Ning looked at Wang Taishu, who did not disguise himself, and said, "Revenge is a very tiring matter." Wang Taishu smiled. Every time he saw Ding Ning, he would be very relaxed. This kind of relaxation came from the fact that he did not need to think of problems himself. Ding Ning could usually do better than him. "It should be Liang Lian," he said to Ding Ning after his smile faded. To others, this sentence would be very abrupt and confusing. However, Ding Ning was well aware of the information contained in Wang Taishu's words. Ding Ning sneered. What a coincidence. Wang Taishu, however, misunderstood Ding Ning's intentions. He nodded and said, "His military contributions are already full. He just lacks some foundation to establish himself as a marquis. His position in the military is high enough." Some clues also pointed to him, and recently, He was the only one the Empress or the two prime ministers had expressed deep dissatisfaction with. I just didn't think that it would be such a coincidence that it would be Shui who would express the Empress's intentions. Ding Ning remained silent. To him, the enmity between him and Liang Lian was far more than this. Liang Lian cannot be dealt with so quickly. You still lack the support of a cultivator of enough weight. After a long moment of silence, Ding Ning looked up at Wang Taishu and said, "In the past, there was Shui, but now there is none." Wang Taishu nodded. "How is Shui's health?" Ding Ning said, "He will finish watching next year's Min Mountain Sword Trials." Wang Taishu grimaced. Ding Ning glanced at him and said, "But you do not need to find someone else. After next year's Min Mountain Sword Trials, I may have enough weight." Wang Taishu stilled. Ding Ning said calmly, "It is not that I have enough power, but if I can win, my status in the eyes of the Chongling nobility will be different. Just like how no one in Chongling dares to kill in Baoshi and Jingliuli." When the Min Mountain Sword Trials? Wang Taishu knew that Ding Ning's goal in entering White Goat Cave was to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials, but when he heard Ding Ning's words, he still found it hard to believe. Ding Ning glanced at him and did not explain. He said, "If you are free today, you can come and get me tonight." Wang Taishu's tired eyes flashed with an unusual light. He knew that if there was no special reason, Ding Ning would not say something like this. So he did not hesitate and said, "All right, I will wait for you outside White Goat Cave." It was near the end of the year, and White Goat Cave was closed. Most of the students had left, so compared to the past, White Goat Cave was even quieter. Ding Ning was escorted by a teacher of White Goat Cave into a hidden hut on the cliff. After closing the door and sitting cross-legged on the meditation mat, he took out a medicine bottle from his sleeve and drank all of the slightly bitter yellow liquid in one gulp. Just like usual, he closed his eyes and quickly entered his mental state to observe. The yellow medicinal power spread throughout his body. As time passed, his internal organs turned slightly yellow, and the aura they emitted became abnormally fierce. It was as if his internal organs were completely burning. Countless little silkworms hidden in his body started to awaken, softly and quickly swallowing the medicinal power, and then spitting out even purer medicinal power. The energies in his body grew stronger. Under the control of his mental power, the countless little silkworms in his body grew more active. At the start, they were passively swallowing the energies and spirit veins around their mouths, and now they were sucking in large mouthfuls. The meditation mat under him started to give off soft sounds. The small spirit veins below him gave off energy naturally at the start, and in the end, they were sucked out in large amounts like water, merging with his physical energy and entering his energy sea. The physical energy in his energy sea and the bodies of the countless little silkworms grew thicker. Like he knew a certain point was a critical point, and a certain point was an opportunity. Ding Ning, whose mind was absolutely calm, slowly spread his mental power outwards. His body and the area around him seemed to have become a small pond. If Nangong Kaishu could sense his perception right now, she would be extremely shocked. Because in his perception, there were countless lines. Even the color of each line, the direction and speed of the energy flow in each line were so clear. He did not wait like Nangong Kaishu. Instead, he gently passed his mental power to the many lines. The energies in these lines did not feel fear or resistance. They seemed to sense the arrival of an old friend and became excited. They seemed to cheer and impatiently merged with Ding Ning's mental power. They quickly flowed into Ding Ning's body and excitedly merged with Ding Ning's physical energy. It was like they should be there, like they had been waiting for this moment for too long. Countless stars flashed on the surface of Ding Ning's skin, giving off an unusually bright light. This process was completely uncontrollable for almost all cultivators. It was like snow falling from the sky. When the snow would accumulate, it would depend on the will of the heavens. Yet this process could be controlled by Ding Ning. There seemed to be countless invisible silkworms crawling out of his body. Countless thin threads reached into the surrounding air. Under the guidance of these thin threads, it was like snow falling from the sky. The snow seemed to fall faster, and the stars on the surface of his body appeared faster. His physical energy merged with the primal energies of the universe in his body, and the speed of the change increased. His entire body seemed to be lit up, and he became as bright as jade. All of the vital energy in his body disappeared, turning into glowing droplets that flowed into his energy sea. This was vital energy realm. His breakthrough was not just a matter of time, but a channel had been dug before the water arrived to make the water flow more smoothly. There was no time for the breakthrough. When his physical energy and body reached the point where he could form vital energy, he would have a breakthrough. The barriers that stopped cultivators did not seem to exist for him. The night was deep, and it was so dark on the mountain path that one could not see their fingers. The White Goat Cave teacher waiting on the nearby rope bridge started to worry. In the past, Ding Ning would have come out at this time. Had he encountered a problem in his cultivation today? Just as he was about to fly towards the hut where Ding Ning was, the door to the hut was pushed open. The moment he saw Ding Ning walk out, and saw Ding Ning's unusually bright and clean face, this middle-aged White Goat Cave teacher uncontrollably trembled. The rope bridge beneath him emitted countless metallic clangs due to the surging aura. Wang Taishu waited silently in the carriage at the gates of White Goat Cave. In reality, after sending Ding Ning here in the morning, his carriage had not left. When he heard the familiar footsteps and lifted the curtain to see Ding Ning walking over, Wang Taishu was completely stunned. Moments later, he looked at Ding Ning, who had walked in front of him, and said softly in admiration, "I knew something unusual would happen today, but I had not expected it to be so unusual." After a pause, Wang Taishu looked at Ding Ning and said, "From the Sword Trial Festival until now, it has been less than 8 months." Ding Ning and Wang Taishu had not known each other for 8 months. But Ding Ning now knew why Wang Taishu had deliberately said 8 months. Among all the young geniuses in Chongling, and Baoshi and Jingliuli had cultivated the fastest from Realm 2 energy refinement to Realm 3 vital energy realm in 8 months. So Ding Ning's breakthrough today was a new record for Chongling. Chapter 115. A new record in the cultivation world meant that one could leave a deep mark in the history books. But a new record usually meant a new storm. So when Ding Ning returned to the Falling Parasol wine shop and stepped into the wine shop, Zhang Sun Qianshue's displeased voice sounded. "Do you have to let people discover you so quickly?" Zhang Sun Qianshue's words contained 2 meanings. One was that you could control the speed of your cultivation. The other was that even if you wanted to have a breakthrough so quickly, you could hide your cultivation after the breakthrough and not let others detect you. You have to be so fast. Hearing Zhang Sun Qianshue's words, Ding Ning responded briskly. Then he looked at Zhang Sun Qianshue, who had a frosty expression, and explained softly, "Because I want Shui Wangxiu to be glorious." Zhang Sun Qianshue seemed to accept Ding Ning's words. Her expression softened, but her tone was still cold. "For you, you have too many things to consider. The final result is the goal. Regardless of whether I can reach the goal, I hope the process can be more exciting and meaningful." Ding Ning looked at her and said, "The fewer fetters a person has, the easier it is to be hated by others." Like all normal old people, Shui Wangxiu went to bed early, but he woke up later than most old people. In the dim morning light, Zhang Yi held a bowl of noodles as he listened to the heavy but disorderly breathing coming from the room. Thinking of Shui Wangxiu's otherworldly aura in the past, and how he was above Realm 7, he could not help but feel sorrow. Tears were about to drip into the bowl of noodles in his hand. He was very worried that the heavy breathing would suddenly disappear, or that Shui Wangxiu would never wake up. Yet just as a tear was about to fall, with a long exhale, Shui Wangxiu woke up and welcomed a new day in Chongling. Hearing Shui Wangxiu stand up, Zhang Yi did not have time to put down the bowl and quickly walked into the yard. Shui Wangxiu, who was slowly putting on his clothes, heard the hurried footsteps outside the door. Zhang Yi's hurried appearance appeared in his mind. He could not help but scold. "Why are you in such a hurry? Are you afraid I will sleep to death?" Zhang Yi took a wrong step and froze 5 or 6 steps from Shui Wangshu's door. He said angrily, "It is almost the new year, and you are still saying such inauspicious things." Other than Li Daoji, before Ding Ning had entered White Goat Cave, Zhang Yi had been Shui Wangshu's favorite disciple. However, he could not stand Zhang Yi's pedantry and nagging. Originally, when he heard Zhang Yi's words, Shui Wangshu's white brows rose slightly, and he could not help but scold him. But suddenly, his nose twitched, and he smelled a familiar fragrance. He immediately grew curious. "Zhang Yi, you are eating noodles?" Zhang Yi stilled. He looked at the bowl of noodles in his hand and immediately felt ashamed. He said with his head bowed, "I heard that you and little sect brother often eat noodles at the noodle shop at the entrance of the alley. I woke up early this morning to prepare some hot water for you. Seeing that you did not get up, and the owner of the noodle shop said the stall would be closed for the new year tomorrow, I asked for a bowl to try. But in a moment of carelessness, you have not eaten, but I have already eaten here." Shui Wangshu suddenly became energetic. Before he put on his outer robe, he said, "Push open the door and let me see." Zhang Yi was puzzled. Did Cave Master like to eat noodles so much? But as someone who valued respect for his teacher, he did not dare to hesitate. He immediately strode to the door and pushed it open to enter. Shui Wangshu focused and looked at Zhang Yi's hand. When he saw the color of the bowl in Zhang Yi's hand, he pointed at Zhang Yi with one finger and punched the bed with the other as he laughed. For a moment, he laughed until he was out of breath, almost unable to catch his breath. What is this now? Zhang Yi's face was pale. He thought little sect brother had asked him to take care of him. If Cave Master went crazy in just one night, how could he explain this? Nothing. Looking at Zhang Yi, who was so nervous he was about to pounce on him, Shui Wangshu stopped and rubbed his stomach that was hurting from laughing. He said, "Remember to bring your own bowl when you go to that noodle shop next time." "Bring my own bowl?" Zhang Yi still felt that Shui Wangshu was not normal. Did the taste of the noodles have anything to do with the bowl? Also, they were so close, and the owner of the noodle shop was so easy to talk to. Couldn't he just return the bowl after eating? Your little sect brother hasn't woken up yet? Shui Wangshu suppressed his laughter and said, "Let him eat noodles with me." "All right, I will go call him immediately." Zhang Yi felt that only Ding Ning's presence could control the situation. He immediately turned and ran out. "Why are you running?" Shui Wangshu saw the situation and couldn't help but shout, "We are so close. Won't he hear you if you shout?" Zhang Yi stilled and said awkwardly, "This seems a little impolite." Shui Wangshu was slightly angry. "What impolite? This is a normal neighborhood alley. Where do you think this is? You are so wishy-washy. Do you want me to shout?" Zhang Yi's face instantly turned bitter. He shouted roughly, "Little sect brother, Cave Master is calling you to eat noodles with him." In the distance, the owner of the noodle shop at the end of the street responded, "What kind of noodles do you want? I will make the toppings for you first." "Fat intestine noodles." Ding Ning's clear voice sounded.
"Same for me."
Shui Wangshu glanced at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi could only shout with a frown, "2 bowls of fat intestine noodles. Why don't we order another bowl?" Shui Wangshu was finally satisfied. He looked at the bowl of noodles in Zhang Yi's hand. "You also bring a bowl and eat with us."
"How can I do that?"
Zhang Yi seemed to have made up his mind. He finished all the noodles in the bowl in 2 bites and then said apologetically, "The 5 grains are bestowed by the emperor and have been sowed by the farmers. They're ground into rice and flour. How can it be wasted?" Shui Wangshu looked at his puffed-up cheeks and sighed softly. He said, "You only remember these old sayings, but you don't know that if you don't listen to the words of the elders, you will suffer losses in front of you. If you knew that this dishwasher likes to pick his nose from time to time, would you still say this?" Zhang Yi's eyes instantly bulged. His expression was spectacular. At this time, Ding Ning's figure appeared in the little courtyard behind him. Zhang Yi turned. The moment he saw Ding Ning's face, the bowl in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter and shattered into pieces. Shui Wangshu couldn't help but shake his head. "Even if you are expressing anger, Don't smash other people's bowls. Zhang Yi stammered in a trembling voice. Little sure. Shui Wangshu finally felt something was strange. He looked at Ding Ning, who was walking over, his eyes widening. Realm 3? His breathing was slightly uneven. He coughed softly and looked uncertainly at Ding Ning. Ding Ning smiled slightly and started to prepare a basin of hot water for washing. This is, Shui Wangshu said a few words. He really didn't know how to describe it and immediately roared with laughter. In the eastern suburbs of Chongling, there was a secluded courtyard. The walls surrounded a large area, but the buildings inside were small and exquisite. In front of a small house with gray walls and black tiles, there was a natural green spring surrounded by wild grass. At this time, the withered grass was covered in white snow. The spring water in the center was still lively and gave off threads of heat. There were even many red carps swimming in it. A cultivator of indeterminate age was sitting cross-legged in this small house facing the green spring. The reason one could not see his age was not because time had not left marks on his face, but because his hair and beard had not been trimmed for many years. His hair reached the ground, and his beard covered half of his face. But even though his hair was loose like wild grass, his body still had a heroic presence and gave off the presence of spring. Two men in luxurious clothes stood at the bottom of the stairs to his left. One of them looked to be in his 30s, while the other was in his 50s. Both of them had the kind of imposing manner that only high-ranking officials would have. Little brother, we may be wrong. The man in his 30s, his hair coiled up with a jade hairpin, looked with some distress at the cultivator with loose hair, and said, "The wine shop youth we paid attention to has reached Realm 3. His breakthrough is faster than in Baosher and Jinglioli. He will not be faster than them. I heard that during the Sword Trial Festival, he used pill medicines to go from Energy Refinement 3rd Class to Energy Refinement 1st Class. The cultivator with loose hair was motionless. His gaze was still focused on the green spring in front of him. He said, also, even if he uses all kinds of spirit medicines to nourish his body, he will age prematurely at Realm 5. Realm 5 has no meaning. The man in his 30s asked softly, "The family wants to hear your opinion, so your opinion is the same as before?" The cultivator with loose hair remained motionless and said, "Same." The two men dressed in grand robes did not speak further. They left this unique little courtyard and sat on a bronze carriage to leave. His words are reasonable. In the slightly dull carriage, the man in his 30s said, and Baosher and Jinglioli did not use any pill medicines to cultivate. Strictly speaking, this Ding Ning may not be able to break through faster than the two of them. The medicinal energy of the pill medicines will settle in the body and affect one's comprehension of energy in the future. So it is true. What is the reason? Feng Xiumu has become stupid from practicing the sword. Are you also stupid? Yet his words were interrupted by the cold scolding of the man in his 50s. How long has it been since the Sword Trial Festival? Not even 3 months. This boy was just Realm 2 2nd Class at the Sword Trial Festival. Even if he was Realm 2 1st Class then, how long did it take for Baosher and Jinglioli to go from Realm 2 1st Class to Realm 3? Other people do not know, but do not know? Just compare the time from Realm 2 1st Class to Realm 3, and you will understand. Also, this boy followed Shui Wangshu to Zhushan District. He was busy and did not cultivate in seclusion. The man in his 30s was stunned. For months, and Baosher and Jinglioli, of the 8 months from Realm 2 to Realm 3, most of the time was spent in the latter part. After a long moment, he took a deep breath and said in shock, "In that case, Ding Ning is faster. Feng Xiumu is more like Feng Xiumu now. He has become like this after practicing the sword. I do not know what he can do after sitting in front of a spring for many years. But the family relies on him the most." The man in his 50s sneered. He does not think highly of this boy, but I want to try. Even the Empress is paying attention to this boy because of Shui Wangshu. She wants to see his performance at the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I will add fuel to the fire. If this boy has extraordinary achievements, the family's view of him will change. Chapter 116. The red sun gradually rose. In an official residence that did not have many furnishings and could even be described as shabby, a bearded, middle-aged official in indigo robes looked at the red morning sun with a frown. A long time later, he finally made a decision and said to the advisor waiting at the side, "Send my box of whale jade ointment to that wine shop youth in falling parasol." Just like all the advisors who could establish themselves in Chongling, this thin advisor looked like he could be blown away by a gust of wind, but his expression was extremely steady, and his eyes were filled with the light of wisdom. Upon hearing his words, the great teacher was taken aback. He was unable to remain calm as he asked, "Lord Sikong, isn't this a little too valuable?" The bearded, middle-aged official smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "I know what you are thinking right now. This wine shop youth Dingning's cultivation advances astoundingly quickly, but the situation of each realm is different. Some people advance quickly in the first few realms, but become ordinary when they reach the fourth and fifth realms." After the emperor ascended the throne, the most famous example was Guoshang of Chongshan Commandery. His cultivation speed in the first four realms was about the same as the best cultivators in the history books. But after reaching the fourth realm, he stagnated and lost all confidence. Not only did he give up on himself, he became depressed and fell ill. Now, he was a tuberculosis ghost with all kinds of diseases. It is too early to judge people based on the first three realms. But if I can understand this, those nobles who are of higher status than me naturally also know. So even if they knew his name like me, they would only know his name. They would not pay too much attention to him, nor would they express any good intentions towards him, because he was not qualified, unless he could perform the same at Realm 4 and 5. For those important people, only cultivators above Realm 6 can cause them to spend some effort. After a pause, the bearded, middle-aged official looked at the increasingly confused advisor and said, "The ones who are expressing goodwill to him are naturally those nobles who aren't high enough in status. However, because this youth isn't qualified, even if they express some goodwill, they won't give him anything too valuable. But I want to gamble." The bearded, middle-aged official looked at the advisor whose brows suddenly relaxed and said seriously, "While the Bureau of Ceremonies is in charge of the ancestral temple rites and is the head of the bureaus, in reality, it has the least power. At most, it can speak with the Holy One and the Empress. I, Sikong Lin, have reached such a position in the Bureau of Ceremonies, but what I can use can't compare to a commander of the Warden's office. Because I feel that there is no good way out, and my revenge seems to be getting more and more hopeless, so I want to take a gamble." Complicated emotions appeared in the bearded, middle-aged official's eyes. "In reality, I am not desperate. Unlike other people, I have seen Shui Wangxiu a few times. I know that he is the kind of person who can endure. There are countless people in Chongling who can endure, but there should not be a second person like him who can endure so much after reaching Realm 7. Since someone as patient as him was willing to do so many things that went against his nature for the sake of this young man, then this young man should really be worth my gamble. At least, in terms of cultivation and talent, Shui Wangxiu knows better than me. We are both giving gifts. If I am going to give him a gift, I will give him the most valuable gift. That youth started late, and his body is weak. What he lacks is overseas spirit medicines like the whale jade ointment. I have carefully investigated this boy's performance at the Sword Trial Festival. I believe this boy is a person who knows how to repay kindness." Hearing the thoughts of the official he followed, the skinny advisor felt admiration. He knew that the other had done his homework before making a decision. But when he thought of revenge, the skinny advisor looked at the wrinkles at the corners of the other's eyes and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Falling Parasol suddenly became lively. This was not the usual bustle of the new year, but many grand carriages. The headbands, rouge, and powder of the noble women, the paperweights in the study, the incense burners, and the jade stones they played with. In the past many years, these things would become symbols of status and identity. Decades ago, the carriages that originally had no cabins and only had canopies evolved into closed cabins. The carriages that could not allow outsiders to see what was happening in the cabins had been a relatively stable and comfortable means of transportation for the nobility. But now, they had many uses such as private meetings and became the most important item in the daily lives of the nobility of Chongling. The cabins grew increasingly exquisite and grand. Just from the materials and decorations, it was possible to see the status of the owner in Chongling. The best carriage drivers could even see the corresponding residence of the carriage. An extremely heavy carriage that was clearly lined with steel plates that could not be penetrated by arrows was originally about to enter the alley. Right at this time, the eyes of the carriage driver who sat upright like a javelin suddenly trembled, his brows furrowed. An ordinary-looking carriage made of ordinary sandalwood was entering falling parasol from the other side. "What is it?" The carriage behind the carriage driver sensed the carriage stop, and a soft voice of inquiry sounded from within the carriage. "It is the carriage of Fong Ho Province's Fong Yong," the carriage driver responded softly. The nobility in the carriage behind him immediately fell silent and waited patiently. Fong Yong was born of a concubine, but his military service was illustrious. In Fong Ho Province, he was the third most important person after Fong Xiong and Fong Xiumu. A person like this naturally had a higher status than him. It was at this moment that the coachman of the carriage was stunned again. He saw an extremely square carriage. That carriage also didn't have any particularly luxurious decorations, but every part of the carriage was extremely orthodox, completely conforming to the standard, without any personal preferences. Vice Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Ceremonies, official Sikong Lin actually sent someone. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with what he saw, the carriage driver turned around and softly reported to the inside of the carriage in disbelief. Carriages did not stop in front of the small courtyard that Shui Wangxi rented. As soon as one carriage left, another stopped at the door. Looking at the gifts that were sent in and were about to fill half of the storage room, Shui Wangxi, wearing a weasel skin hat, could not help but grin. Was this not a kind of glory? Little sect brother. At this time, Zhang Yi, who had been recording the gifts so that he could return them in the future, suddenly stammered in shock. Shui Wangxu slapped the copper bowl that was warming his hands and shouted, "What now?" Official Fong Yong of Fong Ho Province sent a gold thread robe over. Zhang Yi seemed to be ashamed of his startled performance. He walked out of the storage room and said softly. Shui Wangxu stilled. The gold thread robe was naturally not made from ordinary gold thread. If that was the case, it would not be valuable to cultivators. The gold thread robe in the cultivation world was made from the silk of a strange flower called the gold thread flower. It was helpful for vital energy realm cultivators to condense energy. It could allow cultivators to absorb primal energies of the universe, to replenish their vital energy faster when their vital energy was greatly depleted. This was a great gift, and because the gold thread flower was rare, it was a great gift that could not be bought with money. Even if it is a gold thread robe, there is no need to make such a fuss, Shui Wangxu reprimanded the slightly ashamed Zhang Yi after coming back to his senses. Zhang Yi hung his head in shame and explained softly, "I know, but official Sikong of the Bureau of Ceremonies sent an even greater gift. He sent a box of whale jade cream that is enough to last until next summer." Shui Wangxu was completely stunned this time. The official Sikong of the Bureau of Ceremonies was only Vice Bureau Chief Sikong Lin. While Ding Ning had such a performance, Shui Wangxu knew that a young seedling like Ding Ning was not qualified for the true nobility. People from Fong Ho Province had come only because Ding Ning had some history with Fong Ho Province. Li Lingjun was recognized in Chongling as someone who took care of everything personally. He would use some methods only because he had been rejected and humiliated by Ding Ning here. Now, it was inconceivable that someone as powerful as Sikong Lin would pay attention to Ding Ning, even if it was just a meager gift, much less a box of whale jade cream. Whale jade cream was one of the medicines that the Qin dynasty had found useful for cultivators in their century of searching for medicines overseas. It was made from a kind of gelatinous seagrass called whale jade grass in the deep sea. Where this gelatinous seagrass grew, there would be large numbers of black water serpents. If they were facing a true serpent in shallow water, it would not be a particularly dangerous matter for many cultivators. But if they were facing a group of true serpents in the deep sea, then they would have to pay a great price to harvest this kind of seagrass. So whale jade cream was extremely rare. Even marquisate establishments rarely had access to it. This kind of paste was also very useful. If it was applied to the body after bathing, the medicinal power would seep into the skin and bones and stimulate the vital energy to change the blood and marrow. It would not just strengthen the muscles and bones, but also naturally increase one's strength. It was equivalent to reducing the time a cultivator needed to cultivate. So this kind of paste was called foundation-building paste in the dynasties. It was used to replenish the foundation of cultivators. It was enough to use until next summer. This whale jade cream was not a small box, but a large box. This was a great gift that would shock anyone. Zhang Yi could not be blamed for not being calm enough. He even gave such a great gift. Shui Wangshu coughed softly and sighed emotionally. Sikong Lin, what matter do you have? The place like Chongling really makes people like you feel helpless. There are things you cannot solve that need you to do this? Ordinary people had their helplessness and grievances. Those people who stood at the top also had their helplessness and grievances. Shui Wangshu sighed, not because he only understood this truth now, but because he thought, since it was the same no matter how high he climbed, then what was the meaning in climbing higher? But not everyone had such thoughts. Perhaps the vast majority of people would only look back at their lives at the end of their lives. Only then would they think about whether or not they had done the right things, whether or not there was any meaning. Perhaps only then would they understand what they had missed out on and what they actually wanted the most. In the grand study, Li Lingjun looked at the files in front of him. The white hairs at his temples grew thicker. The sound of footsteps broke his heavy thoughts and the surrounding silence. The stench of horse dung appeared incongruously in the study, filled with incense. Li Lingjuan's brow suddenly furrowed. A rare murderous intent appeared on his usually gentle face. He raised his head and looked at the person who appeared in his line of sight. His voice was slightly cold as he said, "Coming uninvited is the greatest rudeness. Moreover, you are a member of my residence. Ignoring the rules of my residence is not just rudeness." Su Qin, dressed in ordinary cloth robes that gave off a stench, bowed deeply and said, "I am rudeness, but I can resolve your worries." Chapter 117. Help me resolve my worries? Li Lingjun looked at Su Qin, his murderous intent growing. At this time, Su Qin's body was covered in the scent of horse dung. His hands were unspeakably rough, and he looked no different from an ordinary servant. His left hand was no longer a bloody mess, and the wounds had healed. However, the tendons of his fingers and his entire arm looked twisted and covered in scars. He looked unspeakably strange. Su Qin did not care about his appearance at this time, but Li Lingjun cared greatly about the frost on his temples. If one's temples were covered in frost at the prime of their life, it could only mean that they were too worried and affected their vitality. It would also greatly affect their future cultivation. In the past many years, Li Lingjun gave people the feeling that he was meticulous, personally attended to everything, and was full of energy. Especially now, he could not let the outside world know of his haggard state. While I do not know how you were able to avoid the eyes and ears of the people outside and get close to my study, looking at you right now, forgive me for not being able to think of how you can help me resolve my worries. Because of his murderous intent, his words did not have their usual gentleness and were filled with disdain. There are many retainers more powerful than me outside your study. I was able to appear in front of you because I have been here for so many days and have accurately grasped their habits and routes. This is my ability, but also the opportunity you gave me by allowing me to stay in the establishment. Su Qin looked emotionally at his shoes soaked by the horse dung. Then he raised his head and looked at Li Lingjun, who was looking disdainfully at his left hand. He said calmly, "In reality, you also know that many of the things Ding Ning says are correct. Suddenly hearing that name, Li Lingjuan's brow unconsciously furrowed, and the coldness in his eyes grew. Su Qin did not seem to detect it. He showed the same smile he had in White Goat Cave. He continued, in reality, you pursue perfection too much. There are not so many perfect things in the world. Just like your path home, why do you have to get the approval of both your father-in-law and consort Zhao? Li Lingjuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said in a cold tone, what do you mean? Su Qin looked at him and said coolly, have you ever thought that having one of your father king or consort Zhao Xiang have a strong feeling of you and feel that it has to be you may be more useful than having both of them have a good feeling of you? Li Lingjun was not an ordinary person. Hearing Su Qin's words, his brow furrowed, but his expression softened. Continue. The relationship between your father-in-law and consort Zhao is most likely stronger than any relationship between the Chu nobility. If one of them confirms it is you, the other will make concessions. Su Qin grew calmer and more confident. He was wearing servant robes that gave off a stench, but he seemed to shine like he was wearing the most luxurious robes in the world. He looked at Li Lingjun and said, so, do not hesitate. Do not consider other possibilities. You only need to convince one of them. Li Lingjun took a deep breath. He looked up, his expression becoming gentle and amiable again. You have endured for so long in my establishment for the chance to stand in front of me. So, you already have a chance? I said that I can resolve your worries. Su Qin bowed again and said slowly, I am willing to go to the Chu capital to convince consort Zhao. Li Lingjun looked at him approvingly and said, you came to me, and I purposely sent you to the stables. You do not hold a grudge, and now you want to help me? Su Qin smiled slightly and said, those at the top do not care about grudges, only benefits. Li Lingjun stood up and slowly bowed. He said, what do you need? The change in address meant a change in status. Su Qin knew that he had officially taken the first step to the top. So he smiled even more brightly and said, you are the ruler, I am the prime minister. A promise to be second only to one and above all. To allow me to return to the country and ascend to the throne, this is not an unreasonable request. This request is not excessive. Li Lingjun did not hesitate. He looked at Su Qin and said, when do you want to depart? Su Qin said calmly, there is no time to lose, today. What supported people forward was not just ambition, but more often than not, unwillingness. In the general's tent of the Tiger and Wolf army, Liang Lian looked indifferently at the middle-aged man in front of him. The middle-aged man in front of him wore the armor of his personal guard, but there was an arrogance and wildness on his face that no attendant would have. This kind of arrogance and disdain for the world could only be nurtured by great rebels who dared to oppose an entire dynasty. A person's temperament could only be determined by what they thought and the height of the enemy they faced. These words were not false at all. This middle-aged man who looked arrogantly at Liang Lian was naturally one of the direct disciples of Cloudwater Palace, Fanjua. I have already used such methods to give you a warning. Are you still unsatisfied? Fanjua looked at the indifferent Liang Lian. He casually used a small knife to cut a piece of lamb leg on the plate in front of him and chewed. At the same time, he said, maybe Zheng Xiu feels that you have secretly interfered in the matter of the Chongling guards alerting us. A cold person like her does not need any evidence.
How can I only be unsatisfied now?
Liang Lian said indifferently. Otherwise, why would I send someone to deliver a letter to you? I can watch as you are killed by Yi Xiling and the Tiger and Wolf army. At the same time, I may have a chance to kill Yi Xiling and make the Empress more satisfied with me. Fanjua looked with interest at him and continued to cut meat as he ate. What do you want us to help you do? Liang Lian said, help me kill Shui Wangshu and the youth next to him. Fanjua immediately laughed coldly. Even if you are unsatisfied, do not give up on yourself. Is this necessary? Of course it is necessary. Liang Lian said expressionlessly. After the warden's office negotiated with that gangster, 2 of my trusted subordinates were killed. I can ignore the wounds the Empress gave me, but I cannot ignore the lives of my subordinates. If I do not care about their lives, No one will work for me. We have fought for so long and know that we cannot always win. We know that people will die if we lose. But if I cannot even defeat a gangster, my subordinates will doubt my abilities. I am not a lone cultivator. I am a general with an army. Liang Lian looked at Fan Zhua, who was narrowing his eyes, and said, also, soldiers are unpredictable. What is fake is real, and what is real is fake. Right now, no one will feel that I will deal with Xue Wangxiu and that youth. If they are killed, people may feel that someone is trying to plant the blame on me and challenge the Empress' power. You can coincidentally help me do this. Also, do you fear that I will not be satisfied and will bite like an injured wolf? Liang Lian's expressionless face showed disdain. The more I am like you, the closer I am to you, the stronger our alliance will be, and you will feel that I am safer. Fan Zhua did not disguise his cold smile and said, while you are right, you should know that we are only doing this for the lonely mountain sword horde. We will not take the risk for this matter. Liang Lian said coldly, you know more than me about true outlaws, people who have nothing to do with the nobility of Chongling. Ever since I arranged for you to enter the city, I have not asked about any of the secrets of the lonely mountain sword horde, or what you are searching for in Chongling. If you are not even willing to do such a small thing for me, what is the meaning of our alliance? Fan Zhua thought and felt that if Chongling was more chaotic, it would be more beneficial for their actions. Liang Lian glanced at him and said, that gangster has already gathered some of the factions I want. Other than Fish Market, he is the leader of those gangsters. If we can control him in the future, it will be easier for you to find something. If we look at it from a long-term perspective, in the future, I will be in the light, you will be in the dark, and we will each control a side. Maybe we will not be so unwilling now. Fan Zhua laughed arrogantly. He felt that he was not eating to his heart's content. He threw away the small knife in his hand and started to eat the lamb leg. At the same time, he said, those people are not cheap, especially if they're going to fight for their lives in Chongling. The price is even higher. Liang Lian looked at him and slowly said, it is not expensive to buy a life. The carriages delivering gifts only gradually thinned and disappeared in the afternoon. All the residents of Falling Parasol felt that a great person had appeared here and were very proud. But Ding Ning was no different from usual. Because he had not gone to White Goat Cave to cultivate, the wine shop had closed many days ago. So when it was near evening, Ding Ning just casually flipped through some of the notes that Xue Wangxiu had written over the past few days. At the same time, he watched Zhang Yi play chess with Xue Wangxiu. Xue Wangxiu's cultivation had been high in the past, but his chess skills were not as good as Zhang Yi's. After losing several games, he finally became angry from embarrassment. He slapped the chessboard and shouted, do you know how to respect your teacher? You won several games, but you purposely made a few bad moves and let your teacher win one game. Looking at Xue Wangxiu's angry state, Zhang Yi was ashamed and puzzled. He lowered his head in terror and said, Cave Master, the books say, books. Xue Wangxiu was so angry he wanted to hit him. But for some reason, he suddenly became deeply worried. In the end, he sighed and looked seriously at Zhang Yi. He warned, you have a kind personality and have the style of a gentleman. But I worry that you are too kind and will be taken advantage of by villains. So, I only want you to remember one thing. All books are written by people. All laws are made by people, rules and relationships. Think about which is more important. Ding Ning looked at Xue Wangxiu, who was teaching seriously. His eyes grew more respectful. But at this time, his body imperceptibly stiffened. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw an indescribably quiet woman in red robes looking at him. Chapter 118. The woman was unusually quiet. While she was dressed in red, she did not attract attention as she stood in the alley. But regardless of whether it was Zhang Sun Qianxue's perception in the wine shop or Ding Ning's eyes, there seemed to be a black bamboo swaying around her. The black bamboo was quiet and aloof from worldly affairs. But it had a presence that did not belong to the mortal world. How could it stand alone? This red-robed woman did not seem to have any interactions with the people in the alley. But the moment he saw her, Ding Ning knew his judgment was correct. She was the master of the underground kingdom of Fish Market. Zhang Yi, ashamed and blaming himself for provoking Shui Wangshu's anger, was pondering over Shui Wangshu's serious words. He was a cultivator of great talent. He finally sensed something and looked up. But when he looked up, the red-robed woman had already turned and left.
So he did not see anything.
He just looked at where the red-robed woman had been standing and felt puzzled. What is it? Shui Wangshu looked at him and asked. It's nothing. Zhang Yi shook his head and suggested softly, let's play another round. Shui Wangshu was slightly disinterested. But looking at Zhang Yi, who wanted to make up for his mistake, he suddenly felt this was another way of teaching. So he nodded, knocked on the chessboard and said, again, Ding Ning. At this time, Zhang Sun Qianshua's cold call sounded from the back of the wine shop. The red-robed woman walked into the narrow alley outside Falling Parasol. The black-robed old man waiting there with a bamboo staff followed next to her. That youth is not bad. She walked in the direction of Fish Market and slowly spoke to the black-robed old man. Her voice carried a peace that could infect others. It is rare to be able to come to Fish Market every few days to take care of that lonely old woman and chat with her without asking for anything in return. Seeing him today, he has a calmness that is not shocked by honor or disgrace. I also have the desire to cherish talent, but I cannot protect myself. He is neither human nor ghost following us. I can only look at him from afar. That woman is full of Yin energy. She cultivates the Yin and ghost methods of the Qi dynasty and has reached Realm 7. Who is she? Why did she come to see you? In the back of the wine shop, Zhang Sun Qianxue faced the direction the red-robed woman had left in and asked Ding Ning who she had summoned. The master of Fish Market Underground. Ding Ning looked at her cold and stern face and said with difficulty, the only descendant of the Shang family it should be, because I often go to Fish Market. Now that the news of my cultivation breaking some records has spread to Fish Market, she came to take a look. Zhang Sun Qianxue was silent for a moment and said, since she is your master's former subordinate, and I fear she is your master's only former subordinate. Now that she has such cultivation and power, why do you not want to borrow her power? Ding Ning was silent and did not answer. Zhang Sun Qianxue said in a cold voice, other people do not know, but I know better than anyone else. Back then, we used thunderous methods to destroy the Zhangsun family, and then used the Shang family as scapegoats to quell the anger of some noble families. We executed the Shang family members who pushed for the reform, but the Shang family's reform was slowly maintained. This kind of killing and soft methods mostly came from the emperor and the present empress. I know that your master was not in Chongling at the time. He was the one who protected the only daughter of the Shang family. On this matter, he used many vicious methods of revenge. Since then, there was an irreconcilable gap between him and the emperor, so if you have a request, I think she will help you. Ding Ning did not respond to her words. He looked at her and shook his head. You said yourself that this is an old grudge. There are too many people who owe the Shang family, but the Shang family does not owe anyone. We want to kill an emperor above Realm 8, who sounds like a great rebellion. Do not drag her in. Zhang Sun Qianxue glanced at him and did not speak. She turned and walked into the room behind her. This attitude meant that while she did not agree, she did not oppose Ding Ning's intentions. The firecrackers stopped the old year. The new year arrived. The stable Qin dynasty officially entered the 12th year of Yuanwu. The Yuanwu emperor had ascended the throne for 12 years. There was a new atmosphere in the new year. Shui Wangshu's small courtyard was decorated by Wang Taishu with a festive atmosphere. Not only were there couplets pasted on the door, but there were also fiery red decals on the windows. Even an old pear tree in the small courtyard was draped with silk and satin. Above the courtyard, there was even gauze to block the wind. Under the warm sunlight, Ding Ning, Shui Wangshu, Zhang Yi, and Wang Taishu sat at a small square table under the pear tree to bask in the sun and drink some tea. Smelling the fragrance of meat coming from the streets, Shui Wangshu said from the bottom of his heart, His Majesty can be proud just by making every household have meat in their meals. Wang Taishu was deeply moved. He said emotionally, regardless of the attitudes of those high-ranking people in court towards us, at least in my view, making the people of Chongling eat and wear warm clothes is much more meaningful than taking down another city. Zhang Yi said in awe, His Majesty is naturally a rare virtuous emperor. The Empress and the two prime ministers are naturally His Majesty's virtuous helpers. To be able to let the people have their own houses and the tillers have their own fields, this was already a great achievement. Also, having enough food and clothing is like adding oil to the fire. Ding Ning took a sip of hot tea. He did not make a comment but laughed self-mockingly inside. Right now, almost everyone in Chongling loved and respected the Yuanwu emperor who had ruled for 12 years. But could great achievements offset a person's sins? If everyone said it was possible, he would not agree. At least, Zhang's son Qianxue would stand on his side. A youth in new robes appeared at the gate. When he looked up and saw this youth in new robes, Zhang Yi had a bitter expression. He said worriedly, Xin Yi, while my junior sect brother Ding Ning has reached Realm 3, you should not be in such a rush. It is not good to use swords in the new year. The visiting youth was the Guanzhong youth Xin Yi, who had a promise to fight Ding Ning after his breakthrough. His expression had been hesitant and uneasy. Hearing Zhang Yi's words, he hurriedly turned around so that Zhang Yi and Ding Ning could see his back. At the same time, he quickly explained in embarrassment, I did not bring a sword. I did not come to fight. Zhang Yi's brows immediately relaxed. He said warmly, This is good. You can sit and drink tea first. Zhang Yi's nature made people feel relaxed and close. The slightly nervous Xin Yi immediately sighed in relief. Thank you for the 2 stalks of 3 yang grass. Ding Ning smiled slightly at this straightforward Guanzhong youth who had walked into the yard. Xin Yi looked at Ding Ning's smile and relaxed even more. He bowed to Shui Wangxiu and Wang Taishu before looking at Ding Ning and saying, 2 days ago, I heard the news of your breakthrough, and your speed surpassed in Baoshi and Jingliuli. I wanted to come find you, but I thought that I could not match your cultivation speed. I was discouraged and hesitated for many days before coming today. Ding Ning said calmly, Fast cultivation in the first 3 realms does not mean anything. Because we had an agreement to fight after the breakthrough, I did not come to see you. Hiding is not a solution. Xin Yi looked at him and explained, but I feel inferior. Also, just like your senior sect brother Zhang Yi said, it is not good to come and fight in the new year. So I came first as a New Year's greeting. Shui Wangxiu smiled slightly and praised, as expected of a youth who walked out of the 800 miles of Guanzhong, so magnanimous. Xin Yi blushed slightly. He suddenly gathered his courage and said, Shui, I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if you will agree. Shui Wangxiu stilled slightly. His dim eyes suddenly lit up. He said, How is it? Xin Yi said, I have not entered any sword school to study before. Shui, can you recommend me to participate in White Goat Cave's entrance exam? White Goat Cave has merged into Green Vine Sword Academy. You mean you want to become a student of Green Vine Sword Academy and become sect brothers with Zhang Yi and Ding Ning? Shui Wangxiu twisted his beard and laughed. This is wonderful. Ding Ning was speechless. Previously, Shui Wangxiu had revealed that he was interested in Xin Yi. He had not expected Xin Yi to make such a request. Xin Yi's face was filled with joy. Looking at Shui Wangxiu, who was laughing proudly, he said excitedly, So, Cave Master agrees? Shui Wangxiu looked at this excited Guanzhong youth and said, As long as you do not worry about hindering your future, since I made an exception to accept Ding Ning, it is nothing to make another exception. I think Di Qingmei would be happy for me to take the burden of accepting such an outstanding student for Green Vine Sword Academy. Hearing Shui Wangxiu agree so readily, Chen Yi's mouth went dry with joy as he opened his mouth wide, unable to utter a single word. Ding Ning shook his head and did not express any opinion. He asked Xin Yi calmly, Why do you suddenly have such an idea? Xin Yi said, I heard that you want to attend the Min Mountain Sword Trials. I thought that even if I fight you now and win, there is nothing to be proud of. You only started cultivating last autumn. Also, when I go back and think about the sword moves you used to defeat me, I feel that if we fight now, I may still lose. Since I cannot surpass you now, I think it is best to follow in your footsteps and watch you progress. Shui Wangshu smiled slightly and said, Yes, know yourself and your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Ding Ning frowned slightly, but before he could speak, Shun Yi spoke first. Ding Ning, do not misunderstand. I am not doing this just for Xiero. Zhang Yi's gaze grew warmer. He knew that Shun Yi had made such a decision because Ding Ning's performance caused him to realize some of his inadequacies. But even more importantly, it was because he admired Ding Ning and Shui Wangshu. Since Cave Master has agreed, you are now a student of our school. You should follow some etiquette. He looked warmly at Shun Yi and said, Do you still call me Ding Ning? Shun Yi stilled, and then reacted. He bowed excitedly and respectfully to Ding Ning and Zhang Yi. He said, Greetings to senior sect brother Ding Ning, eldest sect brother Zhang Yi. Now, this is good. Shui Wangshu glanced at Zhang Yi and Ding Ning, and then smiled at Wang Taishu. He said, Someone in between the two has come. Generous and straightforward, but not as wishy-washy as Zhang Yi. Daring, but not as calm as Ding Ning. He lacks the rashness of youth. Wang Taishu smiled upon hearing this and said, Is it not good to be too calm and steady? Shui Wangshu said seriously, Of course it is not good. Being too rational and weighing will sometimes limit one's actions. Ding Ning did not speak and said, I am going to fish market later. Shun Yi immediately said, Can you take me with you? Looking at Ding Ning, who had turned around, he immediately added with some embarrassment, Senior sect brother Ding Ning, I do not want to follow you everywhere. But I have just arrived in Chongling and have never been to such an interesting place as Fish Market. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.